you up?
We'd like to discuss exhibits.
I've got the exhibit list right here.
Fantastic. We'd like to begin on the top of the second page, which begins with Dr. Sally Smith's notes at 2118, and then pages 61 and 62.
Mr. Reyes, if you can help me out by putting it up on the screen.
I can put 62 next to it. So, Your Honor, here you have, if you put both up together, side by side, you have Dr. Smith's personal notes, the cover page as produced to us. And then the first note in there is the note reflecting her call with Dr. Tepa Sanchez on October 8th before in the initiation of the DCF investigation.
What is the position of the defense?
Judge, our position on this is that it requires interpretation. It adds no value to the jury, and the lawyers are then going to try to interpret it in front of the jury with what they believe this is.
You can always call Dr. Sally Smith. The court finds this note to be relevant, and it will admit 2118-061 and 062. What's next?
Pages 065 to 075. If you put up two at a time, 65 and 66 to begin, please. Your Honor, the first, I think 8 pages are Sally Smith's notes reflecting her interview with Beata Kowalski inside Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. And it reflects Beata's relation of Maya's history of diagnosis and treatment over the previous year and a half.
Judge, this is Chapter 39, immunity. This is clearly her investigation. It has nothing to do with her allegations about treatment or being part of St. Joseph's. This is her investigation into the, that she starts.
Can I, because right now you only have up 65 and 66 of Exhibit 2118, are 67 through 75 consistent with what we see here?
Yes, except if you could go to the last two pages, pages 74 and 75, please. The last two pages should be the interview with, well, if you call it an interview, the encounter with Jack Kowalski inside of Maya's hotel room. That
well, I'm sorry. I thought all of 65 to 75 was just with Beata. So
65 to 73 is interview with Beata.
Well, let me do 65 and 66. We've already seen. So let me see 67 and 68.
Understood.
Uh, 69 and 70, please. '71 and 72. '73 and 74.
And 74 begins the note with Jack Kowalski.
So it's 65 through 73 is for Beata. Okay, so 74, can you put 74 and 75 back up next to each other? Well, let me ask this question, Ms. Corrales. An issue in this case is whether Dr. Sally Smith was impacting or directing or influencing or actually causing Maya Kowalski's care, somehow influencing her care, which is a role outside of her role as an evaluator for, whether you call it DCF, the Child Protection Team, the Dependency Court. In that second role, I totally agree that, you know, what she was doing would not be admissible. However, there is this allegation, and there's evidence that Dr. Sally Smith was, in fact, treating or impacting the treatment of of Maya Kowalski, and there's a claim for parent agency. So it does seem like getting a history from the parents would be important, and it's probably something you would want the jury to know, that yes, she was getting the information from all sides. Because if I keep it out, then how does this information come in? That she was trying to do a robust.
Mr. Oldenburg wants to respond.
Oh, okay. I defer.
Well, Your Honor, to be clear, clearly her investigation as a CPT leader is clearly outside the scope of the law. She's immune for that, we're immune for that.
And I agree.
And so the issue of a parent agency is whether we held her out to Mr. and Mrs. Kowalski such that they believed she was an agent of ours. Not because she really is, because you found that she's not really an agent. And that because we held her out in that fashion, they relied upon her to do something that she did that is medical malpractice. And so just as we could have called 100 other people who had staff privileges at the hospital to say, well, what do you think about this? And that would not have made them an apparent agent. The things you've been listening to, assuming they're true in all of that, is things that she did consulting with the hospital, but not things that make her an apparent agent for which the Kowalskis have a claim against her. The theory would have to be, and conceivably could be, but it hasn't been alleged, that the actual treating physicians relied upon someone that they should have known was committing malpractice and giving advice to them, and that they relied on advice that was, and in doing so, they breached their standard of care. But nothing has to do with her standard of care unless it's something that the Kowalskis themselves believed that they were authorizing and letting her do because she was an agent of the hospital. And so far, I haven't heard much of any evidence on that issue.
Judge, with respect to the exhibit, though, my concern about this exhibit is twofold. One, I believe it clearly is part of her interview with respect to that, and we're putting notes into evidence that he could then publish to the jury with no context, and they would have to try to interpret what these means. What does it mean? Donor, arrow, reject. I mean, there's no context for them, and exhibits, on, I think the 9403 analysis is they have to be helpful for the jury. They have to give them information, and this requires interpretation, and the 39. And she's not a party.
Well,
I understand.
I go back to, in some respects, this is muddled because Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital muddied it at the beginning. And I'm now trying to excise that which is clearly Chapter 39. I mean, but we do have this overlay. So now, Mr. Whitney, clearly Sally Smith does have a role in the Chapter 39 process. So why do we need these notes in your case? Why isn't it just the better course to keep these notes about the conversation with Beata and Jack Kowalski out?
Because you don't have testimony from Beata on this issue, but we have testimony from Jack Kowalski on this issue that she was brought into the hospital room wearing a lab coat, presenting herself as a Johns Hopkins physician, and that's when this interview occurred. And it goes to the hearsay exception. If it's a hearsay exception, I haven't heard one, but this is statements for the purposes of medical treatment. And she had this role where, I mean, we can list off 4 or 5 different capacities she served in the hospital. She had active staff privileges. She was on several executive committees. She accessed the record on October 8th. She fixed her paper chart to the chart of Maya Kowalski, or her report, I should say, to the chart of Maya Kowalski. So that was the first thing that informed the care of these physicians, as you heard from Dr. Newberger yesterday. And in her own testimony, she admitted to wearing a Johns Hopkins name badge. So she was an apparent agent during these interviews.
I thought, didn't Maya Kowalski testify that Dr. Sally Smith was wearing a name badge and not a lab coat? Did I mishear that?
Yes.
Into which? I thought that was.
I mean, I think Jack Kowalski testified she was wearing. a
I'm
lab
pretty
coat.
confident. We'll have to go back to the transcript. I'm pretty confident Maya Kowalski testified in the lab coat as well.
No.
But
Judge, in regard to her report, it wasn't part of the electronic record. It was separate and apart, just in the paper record with confidential stopped on it.
and I'd like to point out one more thing on relevance, if I could.
Sure.
The allegation against the parents, and especially Beata, to support the diagnosis of Munchausen by proxy with hospital diagnosis is that she was failing to give complete and accurate history of Maya's medical care and withholding information from the hospital. And a 7-page interview reveals she's doing exactly the opposite.
Here's how I think we need to handle it. This information is relevant. It clearly comes, or there's hearsay exceptions to it. I think ultimately, Mr. Altenburn, we're going to have to do it with this jury instruction pack.
Yeah.
If the jury finds that she's not the apparent agent, then ultimately they're not going to be able to consider these notes.
And that's of course going to be my position that all these committees and things that she's supposedly on is not something the Kowalskis knew about at all. They didn't rely upon any of that stuff. And so it's really important to focus on what it takes to be an apparent agent in the situation, in this context or practically any other context. And I'm not hearing that. But
Well, this information certainly, when I say this information, this is exhibit 2118 from pages 65 through 75, could be viewed as chapter 39, but it also can be viewed, and so there's 2 purposes that this, and so ultimately, I'm gonna let it in, but we're gonna have to have an instruction when we come to the end of the case. Just kind of like, well, I already said what I was going to say.
Understood.
So I am going to admit 2118, pages 65 to 75. What's next?
Page 80 in the same exhibit.
Let me see page 80.
Just page 80.
Just page 80, please.
Your Honor, these are Sally Smith's notes reflecting her participation in the care and treatment of Maya Kowalski during the hospitalization. She's talking about her observations in the hospital, her review of the PT records, etc.
Judge, saying chapter 39 argument, and again, she's sheltered at this point. This is a day. What are you talking about?
What?
Well, this is again requires so much interpretation by the jury. How could this provide any relevance?
Yeah. I'm more in your camp on this one, Ms. Crowell's. I mean, this one talks more overtly about chapter 39 because this is visitation. We're talking about putting on makeup and
That's my question. How is makeup relevant to chapter 39?
because it goes to her views in the Chapter 39 proceeding. And I don't see how the makeup issue is for diagnostic treatment. This note looks different in tone and scope than the notes of the interview with mom and dad. So I think 80 will be excluded.
Understood. We can move to 88, please.
This 88 looks like 80. This doesn't look like it's a note about
Well,
care and treatment.
what I need to say on this, Your Honor, is that there was a bizarre focus on Maya's sexualization or sexualized behavior in this hospital, including Catherine Beatty. And we have testimony about Catherine Beatty introducing the concept of sex websites to Maya Kowalski. And so we think these notes are indicative of the hospital's attitude to Maya Kowalski during this time. I don't
Judge,
see any way that sexualized behavior, plucking eyebrows, shaving legs daily has anything to do with a Chapter 39
The
investigation.
difference is Dr. Sally Smith was the medical director of the CPT and was doing the investigation, or was part of the investigation. Catherine Beatty was an employee of the hospital responsible for the care and treatment.
Understand the ruling.
So I think 88 is out as well.
Page 110, please. Now, here, Your Honor, you have Dr. Sally Smith relating things directly related to Maya's discharges in January. And the reason we know that is because the doctor mentioned here, the two doctors mentioned at the top are Kristen Danielson and Alexis Major. And importantly here, it says that they're trying to change documentation. And the joint exhibit that's already admitted reflects that the documentation was changed, and the difference between the January 6th discharge note and the January 13th discharge note is stark. The diagnoses are different. Kennedy
Yes.
Krieger has to do with the hospital's alleged attempts to transfer, their discussions about Munchausen syndrome, aproxy, and conversion disorder. So these are medical treatment for Maya Kowalski. I would agree that there's a note here that says concern regarding legal situation might need to be redacted. And then at the bottom, importantly, it's more history from the parents regarding what you've heard from Dr. Kirkpatrick and Dr. Chopra regarding Dr. Schwartzman, the foremost scholar on CRPS treatments and ketamine to treat those things. So we think this should be admitted.
Judge,
David Silverstein.
yeah, thank you. He's the attorney, obviously, in the DCF, so you can't just pick and choose little things when clearly the whole sheet is regarding DCF issues.
Well, I mean, Ms. Cross, with exception of the two references, concern rate, legal proceedings, and Dr. Silverstein, the rest kind of looks like
Well,
medical-related matters
except,
of Maya
Judge,
Kowalski.
Except, Judge, that this was discussions with DCF trying to get her transferred to another facility. It was all in the DCF hearing. There were constant efforts within the DCF hearing and case to get her transferred. So to say this is about her medical treatment when you're talking about Kennedy Krieger, which is one of the facilities they wanted to get her transferred to, you have the attorney involved, you have it involving legal situations to try to say this is about medical care, when clearly this note is all about the DCF situation.
You're suggesting that DCF, or the dependency court, was directing Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital to change documentation in the medical file?
Judge, I'm saying that note requires interpretation, and so they're going to make that argument it just says Alexis. It says trying to change that to clearly, and it's not even finished. That's my whole point, Judge, is these notes have no context. They're going to be shown to the jury and say, interpret them how you wish, when there's no context with the note. That's,
You're welcome to call Dr.
Okay.
Sally Smith. I am fine if the defense wants to redact out the phrase concern Ray legal situation and David Silverstein.
But you'll leave it in the.
no, we'll leave that in, Judge. I think it put context to the notes. It's all about the DCF.
Then the whole note's coming in. Which is, Madam Clerk, that's 2118, page 110.
Yep.
What's next?
Your Honor, we now move to the risk management file and pages 57 to 59. This is internal to the hospital, and they are looking up the licensure of Beata Kowalski.
Judge, we don't understand the relevance to this, to any of the claims.
The risk management department of the hospital does not exercise Chapter 39 investigatory functions. So the relevance of this is creates questions as to why they're doing this.
Why is the hospital investigating the parents? I mean, why would that be a normal function in a treatment case?
If a parent is giving history and professing to know a great deal of information, you may want to know whether they are in fact a nurse. That's it.
Then I'm sure you can have a witness to say what you just said, Mr. Hunter. But this does not look Chapter 39 at all. And so it's a statement by the hospital and an action by the hospital, so it's coming in. Court will receive 2277 dash, is it 057?
Yes, it'd be 057.
There's a third page they say, we haven't seen
Can you
59.
go to 59, please, Dan?
59's on the right
Okay,
side.
pages 57 through 59. Let me see 59.
59's on the right side, Your Honor.
Okay. There we go. Court receives 2277, pages 57 through 59.
Next, Your Honor, 2277, page 141.
And let's put it up, please.
Your Honor, the relevance of this email has to do with the Kowalski's testimony that they were threatened with security. And you'll see a mention in this discussing the Kowalski family and recordings that they're discussing a security guard.
Judge, this is,
Well, can I see the first page of this email so I can have the context?
So it'd be 142, and I think it goes to 143. We were only seeking to introduce this, but I understand the court's request. 142, 143, please.
Judge, this is in October 31 and October 28.
I
This
see
is,
that.
okay.
Can I see the, go back to 141 now?
Oh,
Yeah, it's,
that's not the security guard at the hospital.
And Your Honor, we could also redact the entirety of.
Just let me have a chance to read
Sorry,
it.
I apologize.
Okay, the only possible thing that could come in is that first, well, what does this mean? Also, Patty, the security guard who confirmed 2 weeks for me is Doug. Because the date here is October 31st, which is
Right.
certainly after, substantially after the pendency court sheltered
Sure.
Maya.
Yeah.
So even 2 weeks prior to October 31 would still be at a time after the shelter, so.
I understand. We can withdraw.
Okay.
234.
What am I looking at here?
Looking at further internal documentation in the risk management file about the false imprisonment we've alleged over the course of 48 hours. That's why you see on the fourth entry there, it says about 48 hours. You see who's involved again, that's confirmed by the text. Paula Dees, Sally Smith, Cindy Jenkins, all are mentioned in the text messages. You're seeing what these physicians, and I'm not sure who Ms. Jenkins is, were doing to, weaponize that video, or whatever they were doing with that video. 5 to 10 minutes, 5 to 6 samples. I think it says on server, everything. I don't know what that says. I don't know if that's erase. I don't know what that word is. And when she left the room, we stopped recording, can see her leave the room, ordering a flash drive to put on OneDrive, so marked as to what Dr. Sally Smith looked at. So she was directing I believe the hospital's position is that this video was for care and treatment of Maya Kowalski.
I remain befuddled, Mr. Hunter. How is it that risk management continues to talk about this if the EEG room was actually for the care and treatment? I'm just befuddled. So,
There are two tracks this is on, Your Honor, and there is an explanation for it. But I would suggest to Your Honor that what's happening here is he's putting these in without a predicate and inviting the jury to speculate and to put a burden on us to furnish the predicate for his evidence. That stands the whole process on its head.
Judge, they could have called Dr. Smith if they wanted to put these documents in so that they had some sort of context for the jury. Instead, they're just putting random documents in and then obligating us to do that, to explain their exhibits that they're putting in.
well, it seems very highly relevant to me. And this is a statement by Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, so it overcomes the hearsay exception. Parties had already agreed to the authenticity of all these documents, so I think it's fair game. Court will receive 2277-2. Is it 3-4?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, 234.
I'm cognizant of the time. Do you want to continue or?
There's only 3 more left of the risk management. Let's just do that and then go to the jury.
Sure. Well, I have.
Unless the next ones are gonna be huge.
Um,
Letter to the doctors or to Deborah Salisbury.
yeah, let's skip that one. That's probably going to be a big discussion. Maybe 248. All right. This is a risk management file reflecting treatment discussions involving Jennifer Katzenstein.
Okay, well, the first 3 all are DCF related matters.
Well, 6 lines down, Maya feels ACH is lying to her about her mother, that doctors are lying about her parents. And then Maya, since this past weekend, has taken a step backwards since father can visit unsupervised now. Heard this from multiple persons involved in the care of Maya.
Judge, this is all DCF related.
Well, if the hospital knows that Maya Kowalski feels the hospital is lying and the hospital hasn't done anything, that is outrageous, honestly. So that is
Well, this
hugely,
goes, okay, go ahead.
hugely relevant. It also is talking about that she's taken a step backwards, which is contrary to the theme of the defense, which is she did better when she left this hospital. So that's relevant there. So I would tend to agree with you if we want to redact out this top part of the note. I probably should do that.
Just,
Judge, if you're gonna put it in, put the whole thing in, but with all respect, I think Your Honor's misapprehended our position with reference to the step backward thing.
Judge, we also requested, and I can't remember now why, because I did this days ago, that if you put this in, 249 needs to go in for clarity, because it's the second page of the
And I
note.
see 249.
I honestly don't remember where I wrote that.
And if they want this in, I don't know what to say to that, but the reason we didn't is because we think this, I mean, other than the continued treatment team and the second K Rhodes pain management suggestion, the rest of it looks to me to touch on the DCF.
Well, here's,
Yeah, Judge, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, Judge, these notes are started and bookended with DCF issues, and they want to snip out the middle. If this goes in, we believe the whole thing goes in, because you can see at the second page, it says Michael Kelly apologized for making certain comments to Maya and gave Maya the wrong impression in doing so, which goes back to the fact that Maya thought we were lying to her.
And if you want this second page in and not redact the first half, but I'm being very clear, just by this note coming in does not mean we are opening the door to dependency action. That is not.
But we're not looking to do that, Judge. That's why, frankly, I object to most things, is because I'm concerned about agreeing to things without the court viewing them first.
It just points out that there's a line that's trying to be drawn here that's virtually impossible to draw.
Well, but I get paid to draw the line and I'm drawing the line.
Okay,
I
understood.
understand, Judge.
Whether I'm right or wrong,
And I
that's for
get paid
someone
to
else
make
to
a
tell me.
record, so
Your Honor, just to be clear on something, because there's a distinction between what goes on inside the 39 proceeding and that context of this. It is very, very difficult. And frankly, you have added to the suicide thing now a substantial factor test, and I know for sure they're going to ask for both of these tests now. Well, a substantial factor is a factor in an overall picture. So when we put on our case, we're going to have to, I guess, because of substantial factor, be trying to show the whole context. Some of their experts have also talked about the whole context. So the fact that there is that proceeding and that she was at a proceeding when she got upset and decided to commit suicide and all that, that's all going to be very relevant in this case. And trying to explain the supervision of the visitation and all of that, we're going to have to put on evidence.
And then let me just push back a little bit on what you said. I needed to understand where Florida law was on the issue. And I think I told you back, I don't know how many days or weeks ago, that when I was doing that analysis, I was just, what is the status of law? I did not couple it with the pleadings or anything like that. Right. I think I made that clear. So I'm not saying that they pled it or anything like that. I just, in my mind, had to understand, because obviously this is not something that comes up every day or week or year under Florida law. And so, I had to do the deep dive to understand it first.
And I understand that. And of course, I'm in the posture where they're about to rest. I'm going to have to make a DV, and I don't quite even know what the standard is that I'm going to have to argue on intentional infliction for wrongful death. So it's a difficult situation for both sides, and I'm just trying to point out that how this case plays out if it goes on to our case. Some of this stuff is going to have to come in to explain the circumstances under which she was committing suicide.
So, to be clear, let me just recap. Normally, I would just let in the lower half of 248, but at the defense request, not to redact the top half of 248 and to add 249, the court will receive those two documents under that situation because of how I ruled.
Understood.
But it is not an opening of the door to the dependency action. So the court receives exhibits 2277, pages 248 and 249.
And Judge, to be clear, the reason we're asking for that is the court's ruling to admit the middle part.
You're right, and that's why I think I was just articulating is because of how I ruled.
Right.
In your reaction, you said because of that, then do this and that.
Right, and I was making our record clear too, that's the.
Yeah, I was hoping to articulate it clearly, so.
You did.
You did.
Okay, let's go. This next one's a letter to Salisbury, so that's probably, let's skip that.
All right.
We're past 9 o'clock anyway. One other thought, since Mr. Altenburn talked about DV, from a timing perspective, are you still resting sometime on Monday?
Yes, Your Honor, that is our plan. I'd like to say for the record, though, if the defense is planning to open the door and start talking about all of these hearings, we have a new trial. And so I don't think the court wants to go there. I don't think we've
I,
gone there.
we will address that if and when it comes. I don't want to start making rulings on things that haven't happened.
Yes, sir.
Just like I don't like giving advisory opinions,
Yes, sir. And so,
I call the balls and strikes that are actually thrown, not what I want you all to throw.
there's enough of those.
So, my understanding is you're likely to rest on Monday. So my thought process is that we will delay the DV motions until 4 p.m. on Monday. The defense will have to start, and I want a time shift when the DV motions ordinarily would be done, because I don't want to burn time with the jury. And
We agree.
so I'm just making it clear, I'm gonna time shift when we're gonna do the DV, and that, so no one is going to be seen as waiving anything, because I am making the decision to not do DV motions the moment that the plaintiffs rest. And this is an accommodation to our schedule and to make sure that we efficiently use our very valuable and very dwindling time with the jury.
We agree.
And Judge, for the other side, we will not plan on any live witnesses on Monday. We will have depositions.
No, I need you to be ready to go.
No. We'll play depositions. I'm saying, I'm telling the other side, because they don't know exactly when they'll finish and all that. We didn't want to have a live witness lined up. They don't need to be prepared for a live witness on Monday. We'll play deps.
I appreciate that, so long as we are
Yes.
Yes, sir.
using jury time
Yes.
wisely.
As you may not, I have one more scheduling problem that I'm resolving. It's as to Dr. Richards.
Is it today?
He is not going to be able to go today. He had a death in the family. He's on a plane. I'm going to try to do him by Zoom on Monday morning, and then I should be able to rest after that.
Okay, let's go get the jury. Well, happy Monday, everyone. Are we ready for the weekend? Okay. Well, we've got a full day for you before we get there. Want to confirm that while you're away, you did not discuss this case amongst yourselves. You did no investigation and received no information. Is that all correct? And have you been approached by anyone about this case since the last time you were with us? Have you seen any media accounts of this case since the last time you were with us? Okay, with that, Mr. Anderson, please call your next witness, sir.
Maya Kowalski.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
State your name for the record, please.
Maya Kowalski.
And you recall, Maya, that we had you on here before, but we had separated out to have you talk about some of the human damages at this point. And I wanted to go into 3 and really 4 different areas involving your physical and emotional pain and suffering, mental anguish, and the loss of capacity to enjoy life. And then I would like to go into a little bit about the loss of your mom on the wrongful death claim. So I want to start out on physical and emotional pain and suffering and ask you how what has happened here has affected you, and do you believe that you do need medical or psychological treatment from time to time?
Most definitely, yes.
And so are there problems about this that you can explain to the jury?
Yes, so I still experience CRPS pain, and unfortunately, I am a little bit scared to seek treatment because of what happened last time, how I ended up at Johns Hopkins. I'm also a little bit afraid to even talk about my pain, one, because I don't want to worry my dad, and two, because I don't want people to tell me that I'm faking it.
Is it hard for you to describe symptoms?
It's not hard for me to describe symptoms. It's more so that I'm afraid that they won't be believed.
Is that difficult for you when, for so long, your statements, your pleas, if you will, about your pain were disregarded, or you were told that they weren't real?
Object to the leading, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Yes, and I still suffer from that to this day.
To this day, do you still have any feelings inside where you question yourself if there is an injury or emotional issue?
Yeah, so I told the story a little bit about how I broke my pinky playing football, and I waited a couple of days before I actually went and got help for it. I thought maybe it will go away. I'm just being dramatic, and I kid you not, my pinky was completely to the side. And I actually only sought treatment after my aunt, because she worked at the surgery center that I went to get it fixed. I was only comfortable knowing that she was in the operating room with me.
Now, the jury would like to know, though, they know that you've seen like a dermatologist, and you've been to the dentist, I think?
Correct.
Right. So why are you able, and you were actually admitted into a hospital up at Arnold Palmer, I think, for one of your relapses, were you not?
Yes, I was. So with Arnold Palmer, the first thing that we did was talk to my primary care physician, John Wasner. And when he talked to the hospital individually, that's when I felt comfortable going to the hospital and staying there. If you talk to the doctors, they would tell you that I definitely wanted to get out. I stayed there for a week, and then we continued the rest of the treatment at home. Sorry, what was the first part of that question? I completely forgot.
It was about whether with physical, and well, first about the dermatologist and the dentist. You've been to those.
Yes, so, I mean, I haven't really been wronged before by a dermatologist or a dentist. Those appointments typically last about an hour, so I feel more comfortable going there.
And also, from your perspective, does it seem likely that your dermatologist or your dentist will try to have you taken away?
Yeah, I don't think like a dentist would ever do that, and I've never heard of such a thing.
So how are you sleeping now? Understand you recently discovered melatonin, but
Yeah, so I'm not sleeping that great. There's two sides to it. So it's either I stay up all night, I am in pain, and I'm thinking about all of this, the legal stuff and Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital memories, or I fall asleep and I have nightmares and I wake up sweating. Sometimes I cry, because whenever I dream, it's not dreams, it's more nightmares and remembering all the trauma.
okay. So how many hours do you sleep on average a night?
5.
What happens? Maybe you tried tramadol? Any of those?
I have
Ambien?
trazodone, yes, and
Trazodone?
I mean, again, I'm able to fall asleep, but then once I enter REM sleep, I start dreaming, and it's just too difficult.
Does it wake you up even with the trazodone?
Yes.
And so now, Maya, they know, everyone knows that you're a very, very good student, but can you tell the jury about any difficulties that this emotional pain and suffering, and physical as well, to the extent it's been aggravated, has changed your ability to focus, study?
Yes, so when I'm experiencing higher levels of pain, it's harder for me to concentrate on the material. And then with my mind just thinking about Johns Hopkins all the time, because I haven't been able to get proper therapy, I could be reading a paper, I could get to the bottom of the page, and I have not absorbed a single thing, and I have to reread it like 3 times before I actually remember it.
That adds to the time you need to absorb material in school and so forth.
Yeah, it takes me a significant amount of time. Even though I'm smart, it's very difficult.
And how does it affect your pleasure reading? Or do you do pleasure reading, I guess?
No, I don't even read anymore. I would like to because I do enjoy reading. I like learning.
Okay. Now, have you found any difficulty with talking about, strike that, have you kept up with some of your friends, people that you knew or know who have or had CRPS?
Well, I did have one friend with CRPS, but she did pass away from it a year after my mom passed away.
Your Honor, again, we raised the objection about discussing other people's medical care.
I'm going to overrule that.
But that's, yeah. Thank you, Judge. So,
And we also object on relevance, Your Honor.
Overrule the relevance.
so what effect then, and how are you doing right now, by the way, in terms of pain and symptoms?
I've had CRPS, since I got diagnosed with it, and it does fluctuate. I go through periods of time where it's better and then other times where it's worse. I think just with everything going on, it has been a little bit harder to cope with. The last week in particular has been a little bit more taxing than usual, and it's hard to make it through the day.
As you sit here right now, though, because the jury's seen you in here, how would you rank your pain on a 1 to 10 scale as you sit here right now?
Right now, I would say that it's probably a 7 or 8.
But you don't grimace, you don't?
No.
Okay. So now, in terms of symptoms, do you have any symptoms right now other than the pain?
Other than the pain, I have lesions and there's slight discoloration in my right leg exclusively.
Is that where it started? Is that where the CRPS originated?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And I'm still getting those monoclonic jerks.
Okay. Can you describe a little bit more for the jury what those involve?
So with the monoclonic jerks, it's completely involuntary. It could be from my foot to the top of my head. It's not a specific area that I just twitch in. So it's not really dependent on anything. It could be anywhere.
All right. So now, does this interfere with any aspects of your life? Strike that. Did this start? Strike that. When did this start? The myoclonic jerking.
I noticed it after Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, and it's just progressively gotten worse. And I did meet with my CRPS physician, Dr. Kirkpatrick, and he said that it's likely to get worse and worse.
Approach on this, please.
You may continue, Mr. Anderson.
What I wanted to get at was when you have the CRPS pain or these lesions starting up, how frank are you with your family about them?
I don't want to worry my dad. I mean, he has enough on his plate. He's a single parent, and I mean, just being the father of 2 kids is hard enough. I mean, it would be even harder if one kid was really sick.
I know. Okay. So, does Kyle worry about you too?
He does, and actually about when I broke my pinky, that was the last time he let me play football with him because he was so unbelievably scared that if I got hurt again, it would increase the chances of me being separated from my family.
Mm-hmm. And so these aggravated symptoms, and can you tell the jury, have your symptoms been aggravated by your stay at Johns Hopkins, as they've heard here?
I believe so. With the testimonies of the doctors, they've relayed that when you interrupt treatment, it does increase the risk of it coming back.
Your Honor, we object. It's outside the foundation.
Overruled.
Yeah, I was done anyway.
All right. And then the circumstances you're in right now, ketamine worked for you before, but can you tell the jury why, over this period of time since you got out of Johns Hopkins, and let's leave aside any legal, but just emotionally and from your own internal sources, why don't and haven't you used the ketamine?
Well, besides the legal aspect of it, because I'm sure I can't get into that, but I mean, the stigma of ketamine in the medical industry for people who aren't familiar with CRPS has deterred me from seeking help again.
And does it cause you any worry that the wrong statement about it, the wrong request about it might cause this to happen?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
All right, so with the increased stress you've been talking about, has that had any physical manifestations? I mean, obviously the CRPS, but leaving aside the CRPS, and we'll get into the psychological, but leaving aside the CRPS, do you have any physical manifestations when you get stress?
Yeah, so the insomnia, and then another thing is I do have atopic dermatitis. It was pretty well managed for the most part with ointments. It was never really bad, but I want to say within the last year, it got to be a serious problem. My skin was just disgusting, so I went to the dermatologist for that reason. Now I'm on a shot called Dupixent, and it's completely gone, but those shots are, expensive, and I have to take them every 2 weeks to keep my atopic dermatitis under control. And I just want to say the dermatologist said that it wasn't from environmental factors, it was from stress.
Sustained.
So then, plus, needles, right?
Yeah.
All right, I want to turn to the mental anguish segment of these damages. You talked a little bit about the sleeplessness, but I need to know, the jury needs to know more about the anxiety that you feel and what it's caused you in terms of the mental, anguish, the mental pain.
I am quite fearful to even talk to anybody about my feelings. I don't know if I'm allowed to tell why, or because it's about the legal stuff, how it's been subpoenaed.
Let's
I don't
stay
know
away
if I'm
from
allowed- Okay.
right
But
now.
I'm afraid to talk about that because, but then in the past at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, I met with Dr. Lewis, who conducted a neuropsych exam, and he wrote down things that I did not say. So now whenever I go to a mental health professional, I'm scared that what their notes are actually not true with what I'm saying.
Has it been hard for you to establish a bond with physicians and therapists?
Certainly, it's scary.
Well, what about Dr. Henschke? Did she help?
She did. I really liked her, but it did take me a few sessions to warm up to her. But I would like to see her in the future if at all possible.
And do you have any fears that whatever you put in records may end up in one of these places?
Your Honor, we object, move to strike.
Sustained.
So tell me also about going into a medical facility. Have you had any experiences lately that you can tell us about where you've had to go in?
I know, well, with the Arnold Palmer experience, there was like extra precautions that we took not only as a family, but we informed our physician. So every single time I go to a doctor's office or a hospital, it's quite frightening. There was actually one time I had a pretty bad cold, so I went to urgent care. But again, I waited like 4 days. And when I went into the examination room, it's like standard that you listen to the heartbeat. He asked me, "Why is your heart going so fast?" And it's even scary to talk about, but I just told him I have anxiety when coming into,
I'm going to overrule on that one.
but I just have anxiety going into those places.
Okay. Now, and we'll get into the activities in the next section, but kind of dumb question. How often do you think about your mom?
I think about her every single day. I mean, there's reminders all around. Anyone with blonde hair, I think of my mom. Anyone with glasses, I think of my mom. Certain colors she liked. Like Kyle said, perfumes. When I am at the mall and I walk by Victoria's Secret, I think of her because she loved going in there. Or like Telbots. I don't know, I see her everywhere, and it's a blessing, but also a curse. It's nice to be reminded of her, but it's hard.
And have you seen photographs of your mother when she was your age?
I did, yeah.
Does she look a lot like you?
Mm-hmm.
So have you had any concerns about, as you grow older, looking in the mirror and seeing?
Yeah, it's harder. I mean, everyone when I was younger told me that I looked just like her. And for some reason, I never saw it. But after she passed, every time I looked in the mirror, I myself was a reminder of my mom.
Mm-hmm. So then, you have chronic depression?
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Okay. Now, is there any way the jury could differentiate between days when it's depression that's keeping you from doing the things you want versus days that the CRPS aggravation is keeping you from doing things you want to do?
I mean, the way to distinguish it would just be by asking. I don't think by looking at a person you could really tell what's contributing to the fact why they don't want to do anything. Mm-hmm. So with the CRPS pain, it's just if I'm hurting too bad that day or doing certain movements are too difficult and I can't go to the gym, I'll stay at home and I do just lay in bed. But then there's the depression, which is, I would say most of my depression would be revolving around my mom's death and then being taken away and being held at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. And I constantly think about those 3.5 months.
Does it have any effect when you see someone that looks like Miss Beatty or some of those nurses?
Yeah, this is kind of embarrassing, but I did work as a server, and I was fine working there for most of it.
Is it
I would
Cracker
say,
Barrel?
Yeah, Cracker Barrel.
How long did you work there, Carol?
Not long. It was a very
Weeks
short
or
time.
months, or-
It was maybe 2 months-ish, around there. It was a couple of months, but it was short compared to what most of my peers do. but I was serving this one table and I was looking at my little notebook. And when I looked up to listen to her order, the lady looked one-to-one with Kathy Beatty. And I felt so bad, but I just stared at her and I probably made her feel so bad, but I was so scared.
And so running into people that may look like some of the people that bothered you there,
Yeah,
how does that affect your desire to want to go out and do things?
it's hard because, I mean, I'm a teenager, so I like to go out with my friends, but at the same time, I avoid a lot of things, and I've never told anyone about what happened to me until, now it's pretty public, but, none of my friends knew, so they probably just thought I was weird or being, dramatic, but in reality, I just have really bad PTSD.
Yes. Teenage girls sometimes can be a little hard. So now, does it affect you in terms of wanting to go out and, just go out of the house? Or out of, I guess you have a boyfriend now and his house is
Yes.
nearby? How does that work?
So I go to his house a lot most of the time, and we used to go out downtown Sarasota, but there was actually another instance when we were walking past a restaurant and there's a nice outdoor patio and people were dancing to live music, and I could have sworn one of the people dancing was Kathy, and I completely panicked, and it's just so embarrassing because if this continues to be a problem, I'm just afraid that people won't want to be around me or he'll break up with me.
And that probably makes you, if there's a decision to go out with, when you already don't feel so hot physically, does that add to it?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Okay. And so would you say then, Maya, in this area, that before this, would you describe yourself as already being really quiet and kind of down, or did you have a different view or neutral view? What's the change?
Before, I was very optimistic and really positive. I was very outgoing and I love talking to people. But I think now it's just easier for me to be kind of neutral or negative about things, and then I don't get disappointed.
And do you have any flashbacks to certain incidents there where you are reliving them?
All the time. I mean, there's little things as well that people might think are silly, but are so significant to me. Unscented hand sanitizer. I can't. I refuse. I will not put it on my hands. It just reminds me of Johns Hopkins, because all the doctors, before they come in, one of the first things they do before even saying hi is they clean their hands with the unscented hand sanitizer. My bed sheets at home, they used to be white, and I don't know if you've ever, stayed at a hospital, but the bed sheets are white, so I changed them to pink. Foods, so I remember almost every day I ordered the same thing because I'm a very picky eater and they didn't have a lot of options on the menu. So I don't really eat cereal anymore because that's what I had for breakfast. And then for lunch, I would always have a grilled cheese. I can't eat grilled cheeses anymore without getting sad. And then for dinner, I would have spaghetti noodles. And now when I go to restaurants, if I order spaghetti, I always have to get a different shape. That way I'm not reminded. And then certain colors. So Kathy Beatty always wore dark purple, and to this day, I refuse. I will not wear dark purple, and anyone wearing dark purple, I naturally tend to stay away from, and I swear I'm not trying to be mean. It's just, to me, it's protecting myself. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I only wear silver jewelry, and that's because Kathy Beatty exclusively wore gold. So it's almost like everything she did, I have to do the opposite.
It reminds me now, one of the jurors had a question after your last about, I think it was creature comforts.
Right.
Did you want to clarify that at all?
Yes, so I apologize. I didn't understand the definition of creature comforts. I assumed it was stuffed animals, but I've since learned what it meant. And no, when I was staying there, it definitely felt more so a hostile environment rather than a comforting one. There wasn't, much treatment for me. Even with brushing my hair, it was so bad that my Aunt Wendy had to cut some of it off because it was matted. And then with brushing my teeth, it sounds disgusting, but without assistance, I went days without being able to brush my teeth.
I need to ask you then, insofar as some relapses about the incidents. First, during that first week you were there, did you make it plain to the Johns Hopkins people around you that you wanted out of there? You wanted to be away from that place?
It was so obvious. I don't think you could mistake what I was saying for wanting to stay there. I wanted out, and I made that clear. I told everyone and anybody who walked in my room, whether it was the person delivering food, whether it was rec workers, nurses, doctors, anyone entering my room knew I wanted out.
What about the period where they had you in that room for 48 hours? Did you let people know, even during that 48 hours, whether you wanted to be in there or outside?
I did not want to be kept in a room all the time. I mean, even though I'm in a wheelchair and I can't walk, it doesn't mean I want to stay put. I'm still a kid. I want to explore and I want to do things.
Do you remember any incidents where you asked whether you could leave to go play with a kid or play in the rec room?
I never really asked to play with the kid because I knew their answer would be no. But I did ask to go to the rec room quite often.
Just because you were sitting there for 48 hours,
Yes.
or 42, whatever it was. And then the event where on January 6th you were held and disrobed, did you let them know, Kathy Beatty and the other nurse there know, you wanted away from them and out of there?
Yes, I was crying my eyes out. I mean, again, you can't mistake that at all. There's no excuse.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, I don't know if I asked it on the other thing, but were you actually ever naked in front of them, either top or bottom or both?
Yes, so during the changing process, in the set of photos, you could see two different training bras. So I did change out of that, and Kathy did see me naked at times.
And how did that make you feel based on the way you just are about that?
Disgusting and violated.
Okay. Now, you said that your mom is always with you, and now we need to talk a little bit about your mom's death. And the first thing I want to ask is, you heard the rest of your family's testimony, but what are the things with her being gone that you really liked to do family-wise that you don't anymore?
Well, at least 3 times a week, my family found time to sit down and watch our favorite shows. Being from Chicago, it's kind of funny, but we watched Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, and Chicago PD. So every week, there was one day of the week where a new episode would come out, and that was just bonding time.
And what about hair and makeup?
Yeah, my
Your mom?
mom, she did my hair and makeup for ice skating competitions. When I was in Illinois, I was on the competitive team, so that meant I got to travel. And I really cherish that because those were the only solo trips I ever got to go on with my mom.
So, when, are there certain phrases that your mom used that you either no longer use, or I hate this word, but trigger you?
Yeah, there was a couple, and I mean, when I hear other people say them, I smile a little bit, but it hurts just because I wish it was coming from her mouth. And then Polish accents, it's just, they're so like comforting to me, but at the same time, like my mom sounded the same way.
And again, was this the first time you heard that your grandfather was part of Solidarity?
Yes, yeah.
How'd that make you feel in terms of wanting to go back and learn more about your family in Poland?
I definitely want to go back to Poland. I wish I could go with my mom, but
So now, this was an important period in your life, I guess, from 10 to where you are now. If you had personal issues, a girl growing up, how did it affect you that you didn't have your mom around?
it was very hard because I think when young girls are going through those changes, it's even uncomfortable to talk to other girls about it because it's all new. So typically they talk to their mom, and I had YouTube, so that was it.
So, were you around other girls when they would talking to their moms about issues?
Yes, I had a lot of girlfriends, and it's hard because it's so beautiful seeing them have such a good relationship with their mom. But I get jealous.
I know. So now, with these conversations that you used to have with your mom, what happens when friends of yours, or just girls that you know from around, start having conversations about going shopping and things with their moms?
It makes me very emotional, but typically I'm very good at hiding my emotions. It sounds mean, but sometimes I get distant from them. Like I won't want to hang out with them as much anymore.
Perfectly normal. So now, are you still in the same bedroom you were in when your mom was there?
Yes.
And what about that, if anything, is that a dumb question, but how is that a problem?
It is a problem. I've changed my room so much. I've gotten a new bed, new sheets like I talked about. My dad has painted it a different color, and he's decorated it a little bit for me. But it's hard because I remember, the memories I do have of my mom, even though they're limited, I remember just laying in bed with her, and the nights when I was in pain, like screaming and crying, she obviously had work, but she would always get into bed with me and sit right next to me, try to calm me down. And she always had her laptop so she could do her work.
Just to be next to you. Now, while we're on that topic, I wanted to ask you about conversations with your mom while you were in the hospital at Johns Hopkins. And from the first that you went in, as time went on, what, if any, changes did you notice in your mom's voice and, if you will, approach to you?
Right. So I was granted phone call privileges with my mom at certain times, and I was very grateful for that. But you could just, when you know somebody, like you could hear when they're struggling.
Sorry.
What?
Water's good. So, during these periods of time, and I really want to go from the conversations when you first were in there, and then on as we get close to the time that your mom passed?
At first, the conversations were, I would say, pretty good. I wasn't allowed to talk about certain things, and she wasn't either. And you could kind of hear that in the audio recordings because she's either redirected or she pauses and has to rethink about what she's going to ask. And there's so many like little filler questions because even though we couldn't talk about important things, just being able to talk was enough for me. But as time went on, you could just tell, like, she couldn't think of any more things to talk about. And she was desperate to know how I was doing. And she probably heard, too, like, in my voice that I was in pain and I was suffering. And it just got really difficult as we went on. And I could just tell she was falling apart.
Did it seem to you that her stress was increasing over this period of time?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you could hear it in her tone.
And these stilted conversations, could you still tell, though? And if so, how could you, that she was getting more and more deeply into wherever she was going?
She does this thing, like, where she'll, in a way, like, sigh talk. And when she does that, it's out of desperation, or if she feels, like, out of control, in a way, like, she doesn't have control over the situation, what she could talk about. And depression. You could just tell she was just so hopeless.
What about, now you're a 10-year-old girl at this point. How did you have mixed feelings about even letting your mom know about what was happening to you?
Yeah, I did.
And why? Why would it bother you to tell her, to the extent you could tell her?
Well, obviously you don't want to worry your parent, and she's always been the one to take initiative with taking care of my health because that was her expertise. So you're telling somebody like, hey, I'm hurting, but you can't do anything about it. You're far away from me, first off, and you know that the hospital workers aren't doing anything about it.
Your Honor, respectfully, if we could briefly approach you, discipline.
Sure.
In November, if you can recall back, were there calls where Kathy Beatty was interrupting you and your mom's calls?
Constantly.
How did that affect your ability to communicate with your mom and your mom with you?
Well, it made it very difficult. There were so many restrictions as is about what we could say and what we couldn't say. And then you have,
Your Honor, respectfully, same objection.
Overruled. He qualified it by a date.
and then there was a person sitting right next to me who's making funny faces and acting childish when I'm having this special time with my mom. I mean, Kathy, she could just talk to her mom whenever she wants. She could pick up the phone. But with me, I only got to talk to my mom when Kathy was present, and she made a fool of herself when I was on the phone with my mom.
There is testimony in the record about you being told that your mom was in a mental hospital during this period of time. Do you recall that?
I do.
As you sit here today, can you tell the jury how being told these things about your mom, especially now your mom is gone, how that affects you in everyday life?
So when I was in the hospital, I was told that she was in a mental institution, and that's one of the reasons I couldn't see her. So the first thing I'm thinking is, why in the world would she be in a mental institution? You know, she's not mentally ill, she doesn't have anything wrong with her, and she hasn't done anything to our family. So it really did not make sense. When I was allowed to visit with my dad, I asked him, and he looked at me like, what are you talking about? And that's when I started to realize most of the things that these doctors were telling me were false.
Does that, again, give you difficulty in certain situations trusting what someone is telling you?
All the time.
Suspicion, in other words.
Yes, I really don't trust people.
So now, on this, the post-traumatic aspect of things, we've testified before of certain places that bother you, but can you tell us a little bit more about just random things that bring back these feelings, these memories, these concerns?
Yeah, so I mean, the most obvious one is St. Pete. And I didn't always, not like going to St. Pete. I actually went there with my mom quite a bit when I was staying at the Ronald McDonald House for easier access to get to my infusion center. My mom and I would go downtown St. Pete, and she would wheel me around. And there was this one gelato spot that we always went to, Pachugo Gelato. She always got coffee, that was her favorite, and we would just sit and have a good time. Even though I was hurting, we still found time together and to make good memories. And now the fear of running into somebody at places in St. Pete is greater than the potential joy I may derive from revisiting those places that I used to spend time with my mom at.
I want to just mention some things. I don't want to take you back there, okay? So if this, I'm just going to, beeping noises.
Yeah, so beeping noises are kind of like all around us. So when, you don't buckle your seatbelt, the little beeping noise goes off. Or if I'm backing up my car, the beeping noise. When I was at school, when I was going to school physically, the alarm in between periods. But those prolonged, rhythmic beeping noises really bother me because in a hospital, that's all you hear 24/7. So in a way, the whole entire world in which, I walk in, there's always going to be reminders, and it's hard because, right now I could walk outside and I could point out 15 things that remind me of what I went through.
What about ticking of a clock?
Oh my gosh. When I was in the PICU, that's all I looked at was the clock. It was right at, you know, a little bit above eye level. And that's all I did was stare at that clock. And I was just waiting and begging, like, okay, this is what I did. So after it would reach 2 o'clock, for example, I would say, just 1 more hour, you could do it. And then 3, and I just thought that eventually I would reach an hour where they would tell me I could go home, but it didn't happen for 3.5 months after that.
And because you were 10, you really didn't have the emotional development yet to deal with this?
Correct.
What about people in scrubs? I have random notes here, so I'm going to just say things.
Yeah, so, I mean, people, you know, work in hospitals, doctors' offices, whatever. And after work, they might go to the grocery store, or they might walk their dog, or they might go to, you know, Sephora or the mall. And whenever I see people in scrubs, I'm like afraid of you. Like, I will not go near you. I don't know. I just can't do it.
What about, maybe I covered this, public bathrooms, trying to...
Yes, so this is a more awkward thing to talk about, but when I was staying at J Hatch, they would always have the door open whenever I was using the restroom. So I have like a hard time in public bathrooms knowing that somebody may be waiting for a stall, or if someone is in the stall next to me, I get really nervous because it just reminds me of the nurses who were like watching me urinate and use the restroom.
So then, what about just everywhere? Is there anywhere you feel safe, Maya?
No, and not even my own home. And for a lot of people, that's where they go to relax. And it's not anything that, you know, within the home. It's just the fact that we've lived through so much. And during that time, we were staying at the house we are still in.
Are you voting to move or not move?
Oh, move. Yes, I would love to move.
All right. So this takes us now to future plans. And back when we first talked, we talked a little bit about college, right?
Yes.
And we talked about some places you might want to go. Mm-hmm. My school. How have your plans changed, if they haven't? I mean, you talked about going to school in New York, or what steps have you taken lately to actually make this happen as opposed to wanting to?
Well, again, the idea of college sounds really great. I mean, I'm a senior in high school, so everyone's asking me, like, where do you want to go? What do you want to do?
Have you submitted any applications yet?
Not a single one, and some of the deadlines are passed, and I really don't care, if I'm being honest. It's not that I don't want to go to school, it's just kind of like, what's the point? I feel like this chapter of my life needs to be resolved before I could actually take a step forward in moving on. In a lot of ways, I still feel trapped in, you know, my 10 and 11-year-old body, because that's where my headspace has been living for the last 6.5 years.
Well, given your obvious performance now, the schools you're looking at, they're going to be academically challenging?
I would like to think so.
All right. Well, how do you think you're going to do in those environments with really cutthroat academic pressure and competition?
I think it's going to be really challenging. The first time I was ever alone from my family was at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, and I'm a little bit afraid that when I'm alone again for a prolonged period of time, that I'll just feel the same way I did when I was 10 or 11.
Sure. And then, Maya, a difficult topic, but do you have any survivor guilt?
Yes, it's something that is also really difficult to talk about, but I was one of the last people to talk with my mom. And after finding out about her death, the next thing I thought of was, well, maybe if I said something different or
How did it relate to, like, do you retrace your steps and your conversations those last few days?
all the time.
And what concerns do you have about things you might have said or not said?
Well, there's a lot of, again, topics off limits, so it was kind of hard to have like emotional and personal conversations with her.
Sure.
In a way, it felt scripted. So I just feel like maybe she thought I didn't care or such, like was talking with her, but those moments were so special to me.
Do you ever challenge yourself about whether telling her about how you felt and what was happening in there was not the right thing to do for you?
Yes, I feel like if I would have let her think that I was doing okay, that maybe she wouldn't have taken the step to end her life to get me out of there.
Right. And now, looking back on it, does it worry you that you told her those things?
Yes, I feel like it's my fault.
Okay. Now, I want to move on to loss of capacity to enjoy life, and you're doing great. You're doing great, Water. Let's talk about making new friends. We don't have that much more to go.
Yeah.
Let's talk about making new friends. How is that going? I mean, you have met a guy you like, and that's going well, I hope.
Yes.
Okay, good. How about other new friends?
Well, I recently made a new friend, and thankfully she's very understanding of my situation, but it's hard because I'll make plans with people, and I'll really want to go,
Sure.
but then like last minute I'll cancel either because I'm in pain or my depression's too bad.
You don't want to see people. And does that happen at the last minute, like you said?
Yeah, and that's why I feel even more guilty, is because they probably just think, oh, she doesn't want to hang out with me, but it's not true. I'm just really struggling.
Sure. And then how about connecting with the older friends, the friends you already had?
Yeah, I don't talk to any of the kids from elementary school as much, other than Riley.
Any particular reason why? Like going back even to your middle school days?
I think it's just hard because when you see the faces of people that were present and like during that time, it's already a reminder.
And so when was the last time you actually were in a classroom type going to school?
2 years ago.
Why'd you stop? I mean, usually junior and senior year are pretty fun.
Yeah, I saw it for a lot of reasons. So I told you about the clock. Every single classroom has one of those. So when it's quiet, you hear the ticking and then I can't focus. And then the bells, it reminds me of Johns Hopkins. I was worried that the administrators I was just scared that they knew about what happened. I was scared that I may be taken away because my brother, when this was all going down, he got taken out of class and was examined alone. And I was terrified that would happen, so much so I actually started carrying my lawyer's card in my school backpack.
I'm still there. So the things that you were doing and very active in before, I'm going to go through them. You tell the jury whether you still do them or don't do them, and if so, how much. Piano.
I do not do that at all anymore.
Singing.
No, I do
Great
not
voice.
do that anymore.
Developing the Polish language.
No.
Can you communicate anymore with like your aunt here that
barely, because thank God she knows some English, enough where I could actually understand what she's saying. But with my grandma, for example, my babsha, I cannot have a conversation with her, and it's so hard because on the phone when I call her, she'll just break down and she's just crying.
She's used to you being able to talk to her. Skating.
Nope.
I guess not. You never got back into gymnastics.
No,
because
I
of the
didn't.
CRPS.
Yeah.
That would be really dumb. Any other activities that you used to take great pleasure in that you no longer care about?
Yes, so in middle school, I was president of a ton of clubs, or I was an active member in a bunch of clubs. And I feel like people are like, that's kind of weird, like your mom just died, why are you doing all this? But I was genuinely just trying to distract myself, and school for me was my only outlet. But when I got into high school, my depression was just getting worse and worse. So I actually just stopped going to clubs, and I haven't been a member of a club in quite some time.
What about, did you do some public speaking then in front of the class before?
I have, yes. I was, for like the middle school graduation, I was one of the spokespeople.
And how come you're not doing that kind of socializing? I know another dumb question. Why aren't you doing that socializing and leadership role anymore?
Well, I just feel like I don't really connect with my peers anymore. It's really difficult for me to make friends, let alone keep friendships. And I realize, I am the problem. It's because I suffer from a lot of things, and I hope to get help for those in the future.
Sure. Understanding. Your relationship with strike that. What about your future insofar as being a wife or a mother?
Yes, so, obviously I'm afraid for being even in a relationship because I have really bad depression, and all I do is cry every day. It's guaranteed at least once I'll cry. And when you're hanging around a person that you're dating, you see him a lot. So at first I was able to kind of hold it, but now every day I cry in front of him, and I don't want him to think I'm crazy like other people in the past have thought. And then I'm scared with my CRPS, with the flares, because it's like taking care of a baby, Like you lose a lot of abilities, and I don't want to give that life to somebody where they have to take care of me.
Absolutely.
And then with children, I don't have my mom, so I don't really have a girl to stand by my side and walk me through it. And
Right. Wedding you're talking about?
weddings as well, yes. But yeah, pregnancies, weddings, and I'm quite fearful that in the future, if I do have children, that my fear of doctors will prevent them from getting care.
Okay. I had one more question on that, but I think I'll move on. So let's turn to the final area now. This is about things, what's known as the loss of child consortium with your mom. That's things that she used to do for you, with you, that now either you have to do yourself or have to get somebody else to do. So I have a bit of a list in terms of clothes shopping. Was that a big thing that she helped you with?
Yeah, Kyle and I both.
And then social advice
Yes.
and physical comforting, snuggling, things like that.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, advice about growing up, becoming a woman, right?
Yes.
And then if you got sick or you thought you were getting sick, having a nurse as a mom.
Right.
Is that,
Yes.
okay? Plus now you don't want to go to a doctor.
Yeah.
All right. Doing your hair.
Right. She always did it for me.
And of course, if you did decide to go somewhere, I guess she did split the chauffeuring around with your dad.
Yes.
Cooking
Yes, she always cooked.
and the house pretty much stays spotless, don't it? Still?
Yes, still.
Right. Do you feel like you need to take care of your dad some now?
In some ways, I try to do the laundry as much as I can. I try to help out with our little dog. And I try to help out with Kyle sometimes in terms of driving him and whatnot. And I don't really buy clothes unless if it's with my money. That's why I kind of got a job. Obviously, he still buys me things and whatnot, but I do feel guilty because, you know, he's the only one bringing money. So I don't want to use it.
All right. Tell the jury any other practical things they should consider in terms of things that your mom did for you or did with you to the point where it was, you know, you won't do them anymore.
I think the other thing is just travel, you know.
But you have been out of the city
Yes.
a couple times. Good. Hopefully do more, right?
Yes, hopefully.
Okay. So before this, did I ask you to assist the jury in giving them some ideas, some quantitative data, if you will, on time that this affects you?
Yes, you did.
All right. So physical, emotional pain and suffering. How many hours on a single good day? If you have a good day, how many hours do one or more? Does this affect you? The aggravation of your CRPS and the PTSD and depression.
I would say about 12.
Okay. And then on a single bad day, including sleep time.
15.
Okay. And then mental anguish and what we talked about, all those things. On a good day, how many hours does it affect you?
I would say like around 10.
And then on a bad day, how does this, what we discussed, affect you?
18.
So 3/4 of the day.
Yes, I don't really sleep much.
Okay. Loss of capacity to enjoy life. How many hours on a good day?
11, 12.
Okay. And then what about on the bad days?
That would be again around like 17, 18.
Okay. Now, if we could kind of combine these together to the good days versus bad days in the week. And I know it's mixed, but can you give us an idea of how many days out of the week are good days and how many days are bad days?
I would say it really does depend on the season. I mean, right now it's actually a little bit harder than usual because October is the month that I was taken. But I usually do have more bad days than good. I would probably say 5 out of the 7 days are bad.
All right. And that's taking into account the 3 categories for that.
Correct.
All right. And then about the effects of the loss of your mom. Let's talk about how many hours on a single good day that this substantially affects you. And I'm not talking about just a passing thought. I'm talking about whether, it's substantially affecting your life.
Right? I would say about 7 hours.
Okay. And I had you think about this before.
Correct.
All right. And how about on a single bad day?
That would be like 9, 10.
Okay. All right. So then how many days out of the week are good versus bad on average?
I mean, I think about her a lot, and her death has severely, impacted me, and I would argue that that's probably like 6 out of the 7.
Okay. So 6 bad to 2 good.
1 good.
And finally, Maya, are you worried about the future at all with the challenges that life brings? Relationships, jobs, things like that?
Yes, the first job I had, I held for a week. and then the next one just over, a couple of months. So I obviously don't really know how to hold a job without it either triggering my PTSD, depression, or CRPS. And then I am worried with my relationships, as I said, with friends and even my boyfriend.
Okay. All right. Nick? Anything else? Thank you, Maya.
Mr. Shapiro.
Yeah, briefly, Your Honor, thank you. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Just a couple really quick topics. So I know before you had your ordeal at All Children's, you did have some therapy before, I think, with Rebecca Johnson.
Correct, to cope with the diagnosis of CRPS.
And did you find it helpful?
I did.
Do you plan on getting therapy again once this trial's done?
Yes.
Okay. Just a couple things. You said you have been able to maintain a relationship with your boyfriend.
I have, yes.
Awkward question, but how long you all been dating?
Over a year.
Okay. You have your driver's license?
I do.
And do you have your own car?
I do, yes. We sold my mom's car.
Gotcha. Anything fun that you're driving, or what'd you get?
I have this, I forget what model it is, but it's a Tesla. So we have the solar panels which heat our pool, and then I charge it.
Oh, that's fun. You talked about so therapy going forward. I guess in terms of what you hope for your future, with some help in therapy, you could pursue some of your dreams for college after that. Is that still the plan?
Yes.
Okay. And just to be clear, you have, I would hope, big dreams for yourself. You're very bright. Go to college one day.
I would like to do that, yes.
Okay. Just because you've been sitting here in the courtroom with us, out of curiosity, any thought about becoming a lawyer?
Probably not.
That's a good choice.
I don't
Good
think so.
choice. It's one thing we probably agree on, my. Anyway, that's all I have. I appreciate it. And again, I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Anything further?
May the witness be excused.
Well, members of the jury, do any of you have any questions?
Oh, that's right.
I think you probably all need to go. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not do any investigation and receive no information.
All rise, jurors exiting.
The jury is out of our presence. Ms. Kowalski, if I could have you sit outside for a few moments. Okay, the witnesses out of the courtroom. Red number 1, top left. Now there's, I think, at least 7 questions on this first sheet. Actually, there's more than that. On your good days, do you feel happiness? In J Hatch, was it long periods of time between phone calls or visits? Were you where you were by yourself? And was that super difficult and lonely? Next question, tell us more about the lack of, quote, creature comforts, end quote, or care that you did not receive. For example, when Sally Smith came in the room and your dad was cleaning you up. Next question, other than Jessica guardian ad litem, did you have any other people to help you on phone calls, or did it end up only being Kathy Beatty? Next question, how often did you see Kathy Beatty? Next question, what made you hate her the most? Have you found a good psychotherapist? Next question, do you think you can get a new job? Here's this juror's questions handed to the lawyers.
So,
That's basically the same as what you testified to, but I don't have any problem with it.
the one that I do worry about, and I hope it was inadvertent, but again, the concern I have about the question.
Thanks for the first one.
You can't go by the numbers because there was more questions at the top.
I thought I saw something about, have you found a good psychotherapist? I have concern about that question only because, and I'm not saying it was intentional, but the blurting out of, I would, but my records are under subpoena, I think can be very damaging to the parties here. You know, I just think that opens up a very dangerous door. I mean, she's testified to this. So I think the harm of that potential question outweighs the benefit of.
I don't want to open any doors. So.
I tend to agree. So all but that one, which was the psychotherapist.
We tend to forget, you know, she's still a kid and all that.
Okay, so moving on to the next one. Red number 2. Maya said pain was 5 to 7. Is this on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 50? Here's the sheet of paper.
No objection.
No objection.
Red number 3. Maya, your testimony has now triggered me to ask this next question. Possibly at this point you may know, and if we hear from another doctor, I'll ask them. Understanding CRPS can come and go, get worse, or it says reside or disappear. Can CRPS result in the destruction or degradation of things like nerves, their synapses, brain cells, neurons, etc., to the point that CRPS can causes in quotes, addition or new debilitating ailments?
Object on the foundation.
I think she can testify to what she knows about that.
You know, I think it gets way deep into medical opinions that.
You know, the law is the plaintiffs can testify about those things from their own perspective. In any car accident, they talk about that, how you're doing.
Also, think it's going to bring in potential hearsay about what she's heard.
It goes to her understanding and what she's thinking and how it impacts her life. Let's see, the next one actually is on front and back. This is red number 4. Maya, when you were in need of changing your undergarments during the time at JHatch 1, were you always first afforded the opportunity of privacy in accomplishing the task on your own? 2, were there occasions that you specifically asked for assistance in changing your undergarments? 3, when staff would change your undergarments, did staff use or offer the use of covering your upper or most definitely lower parts with the bed sheets for a bit of privacy? Here's the sheet of paper.
No objection.
No objection.
Red number 5, Maya, while at the hospital in October, November, December, and January, it says 216 and 217. But I suspect they meant 215 to 216. Was there ever a time staff clearly made available to you or asked if you wanted to use or would like assistance in getting to the usual room's built-in restroom? Was an open view potty chair placed all those months, and that was understood that to you as being your only option? Lastly, whether it's on 2 pages. Lastly, whether assisted or under your own strength was some kind of rolling movable screen or curtain made freely available to you. Once seated, you could afford yourself a level of privacy. Here's the sheet. Again, it's on two sides.
Pretty factual.
No objection.
No objection.
Okay. Since everyone has taken a break, do you all want to take a break so that when Ms. Kowalski finishes her testimony, we can just go on to the next witness?
That'd be great, because remember, Judge, I've got that timing problem with my economist. She has got to go on at 11, so I'm gonna have to go out of order and save my rehab person and my
So for everybody, let's take no more than a 10-minute break. And then Deputy Coley, if you could let them know, it's going to be about 10 minutes before we start again.
All rise, we're in recess.
seated, we could go get the, Mr. Whitney, are you joining us?
Yes, ma'am, my apologies.
No worries. I just wanted to make sure. And let's bring in the jury, and if someone can go get Ms. Kowalski.
Judge, should we talk for just one
Oh,
moment?
hold a second on the jury.
I just want to let you know, we have Christy Kirby, she's ready, so we could go with her, she's the economist, but she's being taken out of turn. So I don't know if we need instruction or they'll care or the court cares. And then hopefully we would be done by her by 11, maybe 11:30. And then the question is, Mr. Trem,
Hold on one second.
my voc rehab guy would probably take, let's call it an hour. I would hope 45, but maybe an hour. So I was thinking I would start my direct till noon.
I'm so sorry. So we got a person, when you say out of turn, I mean, it's just in your case, so.
It's in my case. It's just usually you put on the voc rehab and the life care planner first, and then you put
So
on the economy.
that person's by Zoom. That takes us to 11:30-ish.
Yes.
And then is that lunchtime, or are we going into another witness?
I'd like to do the direct of Mr. Trem, and counsel's amenable. He can do his cross after lunch.
That's
And then
fine.
I will only have Dr. Bifulco after that, and then we should be done by about 3 o'clock. Well, hopefully,
Okay.
maybe.
Now, what is this?
This is my whiteboard.
Well,
Doesn't have anything on it.
let's put it down until after. Okay, well, let's flip it around, put it down.
Okay. I wanted to be able to put her numbers on the whiteboard.
The
Right,
economist.
but we still have Maya Kowalski to finish.
Oh, I got it.
And I don't want it in front of the camera angle. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I forgot.
See, remember, I'm a TV director these days.
Yes, you are. For the director.
So, someone needs to get Maya Kowalski, please. Now we can bring in the jury.
All right.
Everybody. Members of the jury, I want to confirm while you're away, you did not discuss this case amongst yourselves. You did no investigation and received no information. Is that all correct? Ms. Kowalski, I need you up here, please. And while you're away, you did not get approached by anyone about this case. Is that correct? And have you seen any media about this case since your last back? Have any of you set off the security alarms? It's all you, deputy. It's all good. Okay. Members of the jury, I have reviewed your questions outside the presence of Maya Kowalski, and I'm going to be able to answer or ask almost all of them. Okay, so it's going to be a few minutes, Ms. Kowalski, but the jury wants to know, on your good days, do you feel happiness?
I still feel happiness, but I don't feel the joy that I once felt in life. Like, people still make me feel happy, and I'm still able to, like, be happy at certain points, but it's not the same.
Okay. While in Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, was it long periods of time between phone calls or visits where you were by yourself?
Oh, yes. Yes.
And was that super difficult and lonely?
Absolutely. I mean, even being there alone and then without the phone calls or visits, it's like torture.
Okay. Tell us more about the lack of, quote, creature comforts, end quote, or care you did not receive. For example, when Sally Smith came in your room, your dad was cleaning you up.
Right. So, I mean, my privacy was violated like a lot. Like I talked about the bathroom, how the door had to be open. I talked about the razor, so I wasn't allowed to shave, which, I mean, again, you're growing up and you're a girl. It's like kind of typical that you start shaving around that age. And I felt like unclean with myself a lot of the times. Showers had to be supervised. There was a point where my dad was allowed to bring, I believe, shampoo, the like good scented ones. But other than that, I had to rely on the hospital, like little bottles. And then when I was in the bed in the PICU, my version of a shower, they just took like a washcloth and they would clean me up that way. Then like the toilet paper, if you've been to a hospital, you know it's like sandpaper, so it's uncomfortable. And then the hair, I wasn't able to brush my own hair because of the pain at a certain point, so I went a very long time without it, and it got matted, so my aunt had to cut it. And then the toothbrush situation where I wasn't able to brush my teeth, again for the same reason, the pain, so I had to wait till someone was willing to help me. And even when I vocalized it, again, they kind of just didn't help in hopes that I would do it myself and then they would prove like I was making it up. But instead, I just sat there unclean and uncared for.
Okay. Other than Jessica, the guardian ad litem, did you have other people to help you on phone calls, or did it end up only being Kathy Beatty?
Kathy Beatty.
How often did you see Kathy Beatty?
I saw her quite frequently. I mean, multiple times a week. I saw her more than I ever did my dad, brother, and my mom during that time.
What made you hate her, meaning Kathy Beatty, the most?
It was the lies, the manipulation, her, I call it like fake kindness, because she presented herself sometimes okay in front of people when I had visitors, but then behind closed doors, it was weird. She violated my privacy by kissing me, hugging me, lifting me up, putting me on her lap, touching my legs. She also, I didn't mention this in my first testimony because it just slipped my mind, but she cursed around me. So she was like informal and inappropriate. And all of those things combined just led to me not liking her. But the cherry on top was the conversations with my mom and seeing her being disruptive and making faces.
Do you think you can get a new job?
I believe I can, but I really need therapy first. I feel like I have to work through some things before I would feel comfortable holding and keeping a job.
Maya, you said your pain was 5 to 7. Is this on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 50?
I'm using the 1 to 10 scale.
Okay. Maya, your testimony has now triggered me to ask this next question. Possibly at this point you may know, and if we hear from another doctor, I'll ask them. Understanding CRPS can come and go, can get worse or disappear. Can CRPS result in the destruction or degradation of things like nerves, their synapses, brain cells, neurons, etc., to the point that CRPS can, quote, cause, end quote, addition or new debilitating ailments?
I would ask a doctor that question because all I know is my symptoms. I know my pain. I don't know the science behind it and whatnot.
When you were in need of changing your undergarments during the treatment of at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. Next series of questions are all about that subject. Were you always first afforded the opportunity of privacy in accomplishing the task on your own?
Well, because of my physical limitations, I was not able to do the task alone. So I knew I needed help. And with my parents not there, the next best thing is a nurse. But some of them really did respect me. They would look away as much as they can, or they wouldn't intentionally make me feel uncomfortable. But the whole situation with Kathy was very different, and that's why I brought it up. The other changing instances, I understand that was necessary, and they did their best to remain respectful.
Okay. Were there occasions that you specifically asked for assistance in changing your undergarments?
In the mornings when I would change into new clothes, I would ask the nurse.
When staff would change your undergarments, did staff use or offer the use of covering your upper or most definitely lower parts with the bed sheets for a bit of privacy?
Not really that, but again, they just kind of tried to look away. But I mean, again, it wasn't, what's important is when I complain about privacy and whatnot, it's normally when it's out of their duties. So a social worker, Kathy Beatty, she's not supposed to be there. Or a doctor, for example, a doctor alone, that's not okay. Stuff like that. Not so much as nurses, and that's their part of their job.
While at the hospital in October, November, December, January of 2016 and 2017, was there ever a time staff clearly made available to you or asked if you wanted to use or would like assistance in getting to the usual room's built-in restroom?
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Was there ever a time that the staff clearly made available to you or asked if you wanted to use or would like assistance in getting to the room that you were in's usual built-in restroom?
Yeah, so I had to have assistance, so I'd use the call button. But in the PICU, I had nurses who weren't as quick, so I would end up, peeing on myself or worse. And they would get frustrated with me when I did that. But again, I know, that's part of their job to take me to the bathroom. So I wasn't obviously doing that on purpose. It's just as embarrassing for me. So when I was able to move up to floor 7, some of the nurses, I think, remember the Daisy Award. I nominated one of the nurses because when I asked her to use the bathroom, she was there as quickly as possible and took care of me.
Was an open view potty chair placed all those months and that was understood to you as being your only option?
That was, I believe, just when I was being surveillance without my consent. All the other times, there's bathrooms connected to the room that you're staying in, and those are much more private. They're out of the view of the door and the window of the door. They're off to the side, and there's another door that keeps people from looking in, and there's no windows on that one. But yeah, the only time I had to use the commode was during that 48 hours.
Okay. And lastly, whether assisted or under your own strength, was some kind of rolling, moving screen or curtain made freely available to you once seated if you could afford yourself a level of privacy?
No.
Mr. Anderson, do you have any follow-up questions based on the jury's questions?
Yes. Maya, at this point, you were 10 years old. Would you describe yourself as an innocent 10-year-old or a more worldly, older in knowledge of things? 10-year-old?
No, definitely innocent.
And was it explained to you that one of the reasons that they limited things like allowing you your shampoo or soap or any liquids or things like that from home was this fear that your family or friends were spiking it with?
One second. I'm going to sustain the objection Mr. Shapiro is trying to make on that question.
Yes.
Okay, let's go to the next question.
All right. That's all I have.
Very briefly, Ron.
Sure.
Maya, just about the visitors. So the teachers, they came to visit you?
Yes,
Okay, that was Dietert
correct.
and Shepler?
Yes.
And then the jury hasn't met her yet, but there was the guardian ad litem. Do you remember her name?
No.
Sharon O'Leary? Does that ring a bell?
No.
No, okay. Some of the family that came to visit you, Uncle Scott,
Yes.
Aunt Wendy,
Yes.
Kyle when he could. I know he was in school, but Kyle came to visit.
Right.
You had your attorneys came.
Right, but all of these instances, I mean, I was there for 3.5 months, and I mean, I feel like it should be discussed about the number of times these people visited me, because it wasn't every day, most certainly wasn't every week. There were times where I went days without seeing anybody that I recognized from my life at home.
Your friend, is it Riley
Yes, a single time she was able to visit.
and Sophia?
I believe so, yes, a single time.
And your dad was there once he was granted access almost every day.
He tried his best, but there's Kyle as well, so he has to take care of the family.
Thank you for your time.
And just so everybody knows, Ms. Kirby just joined us by Zoom, like within the last 30 seconds. So, Ms. Kirby, I'm going to place you into the waiting room for just a moment. We'll call you in just a couple of moments. Anything further?
Maya, when you did have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people visit you, were these on a limited basis?
Oh, yeah, it's not like they could stay the whole day. There was a time restriction. There were sometimes supervisors, actually, most of the time, there were supervisors. And there was a lot of difficulties with, in respect to my friend Riley getting in.
Anything further, Mr. Shapiro?
No, thank you, Ron.
Members of the jury, any further questions? Okay. Okay, members of the jury, unfortunately, that's not a question I'm going to be able to ask. So I think we've asked all the questions that we're able to ask at this point. So Ms. Smile Kowalski, if you could go have a seat.
Thank you.
And Mr. Anderson, the name of your next witness.
Christy Kirby, may it please the court?
She's on Zoom, I'm gonna have to do it. And Mr. Reyes, are you going to,
Do you guys need me in the meeting room?
okay, Ms. Kirby, I need you to unmute yourself.
I think he's asking about the audio.
Ms. Kirby, this is Judge Carroll, good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Are you currently in the state of Florida?
Yes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm in Georgia.
Okay. I need you to listen to my instruction. I'm a judge in the state of Florida.
Sorry, I don't think anyone can see it except on that screen.
Yeah, I asked Mr. Reyes to put it up.
We joined the meeting.
Or Mr. Cottrell. There we go. Okay, Ms. Kirby, since I'm a judge in the state of Florida, my power is in at the border of the state. So
Okay.
you are actually seated in Georgia right this second, but you're testifying.
Just a moment, Your Honor.
The echo is because of Mr. Reyes' computer. We fixed it. There we go. Okay, so Ms. Kirby, because you're in Georgia, I need one of two things to happen. Either you need somebody there to swear you in, or I need you to agree I can swear you in. Now, by agreeing to me having you swear you in, that means that if there was ever any type of action for like perjury or to enforce against you, you are consenting to jurisdiction here in Sarasota County, Florida, because you are actually testifying in a courtroom in Sarasota County, Florida. So with that understanding, do you agree I can swear you in?
Yes, Your Honor, I agree.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give is the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You can go ahead and lower your hand. And Mr. Anderson, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I inquire as to whether Mr. Whitney, if there are numbers here, can write them on the whiteboard at the same time? We can move it over, but I just want to get it up there right now.
Your whiteboard, sure.
Okay.
I don't think we can move that other whiteboard without a lot of changing of locations of wires.
Do you have a recommendation on what we said that?
Where Mr. Anderson previously set it up is fine with me if it's okay with the court reporter.
Please state your name for the record.
Yes, it's Christy, Kristi, Kirby, Kirby.
And Ms. Kirby, have you been asked here as an economist to evaluate the economic damages of the Kowalskis?
Yes, I have.
I'd like you to give the jury the benefit of some of your background, training, and experience, starting with the name of your firm, but then going into your degree beginning in undergrad.
Sure. I'm self-employed, and the name of my firm is Mulder and Kirby Economists. For my undergraduate degree, I studied education. I also have 2 master's degrees. My first master's degree is also in education, and both of those are from Ohio University. And then my second master's degree is a master's in business administration, and that's from the University of South Florida.
So that's an MBA.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Explain to the
Hold on one second. Members of the defense, if one or more of you want to relocate over to where Mr. Whitney is, so you'll be able to see when he writes, I'm fine with that.
It's going to be the same
Or I'll
thing.
flash the board too.
It'll be the same thing for it.
And
Okay. All right. Can you explain to the jury what an economist is?
Yes, an economist is someone who studies the labor and financial markets in our society. So in a case like the one we're here about today, an economist would be looking at inflation, interest rates, growth in medical costs, and growth in wages over time, and then how those variables correlate and interact.
Okay. And so in addition to your MBA and your other degrees, Let me get that out of the way. Can you tell us about any additional education or experience you've had towards offering opinions here today in the field of economics?
Yes, in addition to my educational background and studies, I've been working as an economist on a full-time basis for the past 7.5 years. I've worked on hundreds or likely thousands of cases by this point and spent countless hours on the research that I'm here testifying to today. I worked on cases such as employment cases, defamation cases, commercial damages cases, death cases, and personal injury cases like this one. I've also taught coursework at the University of South Florida, and I've done work for the United States Department of Justice.
Right. And so then you're getting paid to be here, or actually to be there being here.
Yes, I get paid for the work that I do. My initial retainer is $1,800. I then charge $250 an hour for any analysis, research, calculations, waiting time, and travel. And I charge $900 for up to 2 hours of testimony by deposition or at trial.
Then we'll keep it under 2 hours. In your experience in private consulting, have you evaluated cases where you've been asked to evaluate the loss of support and replacement of household services for surviving family members, like we have here, and then reducing those to present value?
Yes, much of the consulting work that I do relates to these types of issues where I'm studying growth in wages historically, personal consumption expenses, fringe benefits, taxes, the replacement value of services, increases in medical costs over time, and then interest earnings. I'm looking at how these variables correlate and interact over time.
Okay. And do you do work for both sides of the spectrum on cases where there is a plaintiff and cases where there is a defendant for the defendant?
Yes, and the methodology that I use to reduce damages to present value is the same regardless if I'm retained by the plaintiff or the defendant.
Can you explain to the jury a little bit about present value? They'll hear it and probably see it in the jury instructions, but can you explain a little bit about why it is and how you come about it?
Sure. So present value is the amount of money that someone would need today to cover costs or expenses as they occur into the future. So we're here regarding the Kowalski family. And when I'm talking about present value, I'm going to be talking about the losses that they've experienced and how much money they would need today to cover these expenses or these losses as they occur into the future. And I have to take into account several variables for that. One, I have to take into account the increases in medical costs that will occur over the future time period. And I also have to take into account the growth in wages. Additionally, while I'm looking at the growth in those two variables, I also have to take into account that any money they receive today can be invested and earn interest on safe government investments. So by the end of the time period and the damages I'm calculating, the present value amounts that I give, the Kowalski family would be no better off or no worse off financially. They're just replacing the economic losses as they occur into the future.
I see. So the amount of money invested now that would pay out a sufficient amount of money to cover these expenses in the future. Is that right?
Yes.
And this would go out towards their lifetime or their work lifetime.
Yes, that's correct.
How do you determine the lifespan here, both work and human lifespan?
Regarding, so in terms of life expectancy, I rely on government data. It's collected and analyzed by the CDC and published by the National Vital Statistics reports. So that's what I've relied upon for calculating life expectancy in this case. And then for the work life expectancy of Maya Kowalski, I've relied on the vocational assessment of Mr. Tremp. He's calculated a work life expectancy to age 65 and age 70, two scenarios. Mm-hmm. And then for Beata Kowalski, I've calculated her damages to her age 58.1 years old, which is 7.5 years into the future from the start of this trial docket in September.
All right. And so and let the record reflect that your life expectancy tables are in evidence, but can you tell the jury which particular tables you used in this case in case they want to double check?
Sure, no problem. So regarding the calculations I've done for Maya Kowalski, I have used the 2020 life expectancy tables for white females. This is the most recently published data. It was published in August of 2022. So even though it says 2020, it's the most recent data that we have available. It takes some time for the government to collect and analyze and publish the data. And then, okay.
Go ahead.
And then for Beata, I used the life expectancy tables from 2017 for white females. I calculated her life expectancy at the time of her death and then deducted for the past time period to get her life expectancy. And then also related to the economic damages that I've calculated regarding Beata, I've calculated Jack Kowalski's life expectancy using the 2020 all males white males life expectancy tables.
Are we going to get to those later, or should you give them to us now as to what the life expectancies are?
I'm fine either way. We'll probably discuss them later as well, but
Okay. Fine with me. All right. And have you been previously qualified as an expert in the field of economics in a court of law?
yes, many times.
All right. Tell the jury what information you were provided in order for you to do your calculations and provide them with some present values of economic damages.
Sure. Would you like me to go over what I specifically reviewed for Maya and then Beata, or would you like me to give them all of the materials I've reviewed at once?
You can separate them out if you want.
Okay, sure. So for Maya, some of them will overlap, but regarding Maya, I've reviewed a copy of the fourth amended complaint, plaintiff's answers to interrogatories, which is sworn testimony by the plaintiff or questions posed by the defense. I've also reviewed the life care plan of Dr. Bifoucault, the vocational assessments of Mr. Robert Tremp. I've reviewed the Aetna summary and medical liens regarding past medical expenses, and then the deposition transcript of Maya from March 12th, 2022, and the deposition transcript of Jack from November 6th, 2019. For Beata, I also reviewed a background questionnaire and a household services questionnaire that was completed. I've reviewed tax documents, which includes W-2s and other earnings documentation from 2013 to 2018. And that's the additional information I reviewed regarding Beata's calculations.
Yes, ma'am. And what research do you do in order to reach your conclusion on the economic damages once you have the basic facts?
Sure. So for research, I've researched life expectancy, as we've discussed, the growth in medical costs and interest earnings on safe government investments, and the growth in wages. Those are things that I review routinely in my practice for the cases that I'm working on. And then additionally, the research that I did regarding the economic damages for Beata, I've looked at household services wages, specifically growth in wages for nurses, personal consumption. I've looked at fringe benefit information from the Kaiser Family Foundation. I've also studied and reviewed the American Time Use Survey and done calculations and review of taxes, income taxes.
So the jury knows, what is personal consumption and how does it relate to wrongful death damages?
Sure. Personal consumption are expenses of the decedent that would no longer occur after their death. So it includes items such as food, clothing, a portion of the utilities, recreation or leisure expenses, those types of items.
Understood. Have you worked with Dr. Bifoucault and Mr. Tremp in the past?
Yes, I see their reports frequently in the line of work that I do.
And they'll be in evidence in a moment. Yes. Sorry. All right. So now you've defined what you have, what research you did. Can you tell the jury what, well, first let's do the past medical expenses and let the record reflect that the Aetna bills are in evidence. I'm not sure which number, but they're here. And I ask you to perform some computations as to that.
Yes.
And can you please tell the jury, based upon your background, training, experience, and to a reasonable economic certainty, what the past medical expenses insofar as the Aetna insurance came to?
Sure. I received a summary of the past medical expenses and I totaled them up to be $561,298.55.
Right. All right.
Your Honor, very briefly approach on that issue.
Okay. And Ms. Kirby, I'm going to mute you so that you're not going to be able to hear what we're talking about.
Okay, no problem.
You may continue, Mr. Andrews. Oops, wait. I gotta. Can you hear us again, Ms. Kirby?
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Ms. Kirby, the reason for all that was I think either I misspoke or you did, because I asked you for the amount of past medical expenses billed, and I think you said lean, but it's the same, but it's the number is correct.
I believe I indicated in the items I reviewed, I also reviewed some liens, but the number I provided was only the Aetna billing.
Got it. All right. And were there additional claimed amounts and let's just go down then, was there an additional amount for $375?
Yes.
$314,285.79.
Yes.
$9,334.47.
Yes.
All right. Have you had the opportunity to total all of those into the 561,298.55, or is that something we need to do?
I haven't totaled that, but I can. I brought my calculators today.
Okay. Let's have at it.
If you give me just a moment, thank you.
Okay. Sure. 375. Right. $314,285.79. $9,334.47.
I'm just double checking it. Just a moment. Okay, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, it's $885,000 $293.81.
All right, and I have to ask you, do you have an opinion based upon your background, training, experience, and to a reasonable economic certainty as to whether this number, $885,293.81, represents the documented medical bills paid in this case?
I can say within a reasonable degree of economic certainty that the addition that I just did regarding the numbers that were outlined are provided. But that's the best I can get there.
And then let the record reflect that the Aetna bills are at Exhibit 2017. All right. Now, you used a term before called earning capacity. What do you mean by that?
Yes, a person's earning capacity is their ability or their capacity to demand wages in the open labor market. It's based on their education, talent, training, skills, and experience.
Where do you get that information? Or do you rely on Dr. Bifulco or Mr. Tremp for that?
Well, for the definition of earning capacity, that's general knowledge in the field that I work in and in a vocational assessment, but I've relied on Mr. Trump regarding the figures that I have used for earning capacity.
Right. All right. So now on that, can you explain how you did your calculations regarding the present value of Maya's future loss of earning capacity?
Yes. I've relied on the vocational assessment of Mr. Trump. In his vocational assessment, he indicated that Maya's pre-injury earning capacity was $1,883 per week, which is an annual amount of $97,916 per year. He began the. Go ahead.
No, please.
Okay. He began these calculations when she turns age 28. It's my understanding to allow for time for her to complete collegiate level coursework. And then he's calculated her work life to age 65 and 70. So with that information, I can calculate the present value amounts of there. Okay. And then he's provided two scenarios. One, which is a total loss of earning capacity, and the second, which represents a 50% reduction in earning capacity.
Okay, and these are just based on numbers provided, not any specific data to you.
I've relied on the vocational assessment of Mr. Trump. In his report, he outlines the data that he relied upon, but I'll allow him to test. Yeah, that sounds good.
I'll ask him. All right.
Okay.
Tell us the numbers then for the four scenarios that were calculated for Maya's future loss of earning capacity. And if you would, can you tell us, before you say them though, are these calculated with a reasonable degree of economic certainty?
Yes, they are.
All right, so these are the present values. And if you would tell us what those are.
Sure. So the first two items that I'll give will be the present value to age 65 for first the total loss and then the 50% reduction. And then I'll go on and give the present value numbers to Maya's age 70 and at the total loss and then the 50% reduction.
Okay.
So the first number, and I provide my present value numbers in the form of a range.
Okay.
On the low end of the range to age 65, a total loss would be $3,015,765 to the high end of $4,358,011.
Sure. I think she said, well, go ahead. Could you repeat them, please, for Mr. Whitney?
$3,015,765 to $4,358,011.
And what accounts for the range here, as opposed to a specific number?
those are based on the assumptions I make when calculating present value between growth in wages and interest earnings on safe government investments.
Understood. All right. And so then with a 50% reduction to age 65.
Sure. The 50% reduction on the low end is $1,507,883 to the high end of $2,179,006.
So these are the amounts of money, if invested now, would pay out sufficiently to make up for lost future wages or diminished earning
Yeah.
capacity. All right. So let's talk about age 70.
Sure. Age 70 for a total loss on the low end is $3,344,625 to the high end of $5,079,783.
Okay. And that's for the total loss. And then for a 50% reduction.
Sure. On the low end is $1,672,313 to the high end of $2,539,892.
Now, either from your own experience or from your research, has it come to your attention whether statistically more people are working past 65 and into 70 than, say, 30 years ago?
I would say people tend to work longer now, but the minimum Social Security retirement age is 67, but if you wait a few more years, you can technically collect more if you retire at age 70.
I see. And then was that one of the bases for your calculation, the assumption that folks would retire at those ages?
No, I just relied on Mr. Trump for those two ages. Those are the ages he outlined.
Okay. All right. Are there other ways to calculate present value other than the ones that you've explained?
Yes. So the methodology I use, I discussed, I'm looking at the relationship between growth in wages and interest earnings on safe government investments. And when I look at the data historically over time and smooth it out, it falls within a net negative 1% to a net positive 1% relationship between those variables. On the low end, what I've given, and I'm just giving this to give some context to these other methods so you can see how it all fits in.
Right.
But on the low end, the net negative 1% reflects a situation where, for example, your growth in wages or medical costs are being outpaced by interest earnings on safe government investments. So you're earning slightly more interest, an average of 1% more than the growth in these other variables over time. And that's why you need less money. The opposite end, the plus 1%, reflects a situation where your growth in medical costs and wages are outpacing the interest earnings by an average of 1% per year. And that's why you need more money, because your interest earnings aren't quite keeping up with the growth in those costs over time. And that shows my range.
And
Go ahead.
Go
ahead.
No.
Okay. Another methodology that you asked, one is called the forecasting method that some economists use.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they use a growth rate to grow these expenses into the future. And then they choose a discount rate where they discount it back to what's called present value. So they grow it to future value and then discount it back to present value. My calculation takes into account both of those variables at the same time. But when you use the forecasting method, you just arrive at one number
Right.
for the present value amounts. And then the offset method, this is the easiest method out of the three. It's called the total offset method. And that assumes that any growth in wages or medical costs is completely offset by the interest earnings. So you end up with a 0% relationship. So in that scenario, you would just take the annual amount and multiply it by the number of years over which you'd like to calculate the damages, or which the damages are calculated. And that'll give you a good approximation of present value, and it gets you pretty much right in the middle of my range of the net negative 1% to net positive 1%.
Now, are all of these methodologies, have they been, in your experience, accepted by courts at different times for different reasons?
Yes.
And so if the jury, on the offset method then, would it be correct to say that if the jury, for instance, determined that Maya's earning capacity and hence loss would be greater, if they chose the offset method, it would just be the number whatever it is? In other words, there's zero need to reduce or increase?
Right. If they felt that any of the calculations I provide today need to be adjusted based on the testimony they hear, they would just take the annual amount that they feel is appropriate and multiply it over the number of years that they feel is appropriate. And that'll get a good approximation of present value. It's actually, my understanding, mandated in the state of Pennsylvania to calculate present value using the total offset method.
Okay. In the state
But
of
we're in
Pennsylvania.
Florida. Yeah, we're in Florida. So you don't have to do it here. And most economists will use either the methodology I use or the forecasting method, but the offset method is also very much acceptable.
All right. And do any of these damages include amounts for what are known as general or human damages?
No, these are just the straight economic financial damages.
So then the jury would be asked to determine that as a set of numbers that you really can't calculate as an economist.
That's my understanding. I don't calculate any damages such as pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life, anything. I think that's what you're referring to as the human damages.
Yes. Yeah.
My calculations don't include any of those figures.
And again, to be certain, are all of the opinions you expressed here under these scenarios given today with a reasonable degree of economic certainty based upon your background, training, and experience and analysis of the data?
Yes.
Your witness.
Oh, wait. Okay.
Hold on a second, Ms. Kirby.
Yeah, may I have just 1 minute with my defense team before I cross?
Sure. Just one moment, Ms. Kirby.
Okay.
Good morning, Ms. Kirby.
Yes, it's still morning. Good morning. How are
Okay.
you?
I've made that mistake before. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. So a lot of big numbers, but let me just make sure that we and the jury understand your role. What you're doing here is the math, right?
You are 100% right. Yes.
All right. I'm on a roll. Let me see if I can keep it going.
Oh, okay.
All right. So, and what that means is you're not here telling this jury that your opinion is, for example, Maya will never work again, right?
That's correct. That's not my opinion.
Okay.
I'm just doing the numbers. I have no opinion on that.
Gotcha. And just to be crystal clear, you're not here to tell the jury, you're not endorsing any of this. You're just saying if they believe what, for example, Mr. Trump is saying, here's what the calculations would be. Is that fair?
Yes, the present value amounts.
Okay. So let me talk to you a little bit about the present value amounts of the disability, what you calculated, and I heard a number that approached 5 million. That would imply that Maya will never, ever work again. Is that what that means?
Based on what Mr. Trump has outlined as far as her pre-injury earning capacity, yes, that number is the high end of the total loss to age 70.
Okay. And did you talk about loss of support and services?
I did not.
Okay. No other questions, Your Honor?
Mr. Anderson, anything further?
I'm sorry. Yes, I did not cover a couple, with the court's indulgence. I thought that was a little short. All right, what other calculations have you prepared at our request? Have you, for instance, past support calculations for Beata Kowalski? And what is loss of support?
Sure. So I've also done additional calculations for Maya regarding the life care plan of Dr. Baifuko, if we're to go over that. And then I have done calculations regarding economic damages related to Beata Kowalski for loss of support and services.
All right. Can you first give us those for Beata?
Sure. So I believe your question prior to me saying the damages I haven't calculated or provided yet, you asked me what loss of support is, and loss of support is the money that would have been available to the survivor. So that's referring to the wages that Beata was earning and the support that would have remained from the wages she earned to go to her family.
Right. Okay. And any other factors involved in that calculation?
Yes, I've also allotted a value for fringe benefits. Those are additional benefits provided by an employer to supplement the employee's earnings. They can be paid for in full or in part by the employer. I've also deducted an amount for unreimbursed business expenses that Beata was spending related to her work. And then I've deducted for personal consumption. We've discussed what that was earlier. And then I've deducted for taxes in this calculation so that the end figure is the loss of support to her family.
All right. And the loss of support for household services, can you give the jury an idea of what that generally entails?
Sure. I'm calculating the replacement value of these services. So household services typically includes items such as housekeeping, cleaning, food preparation, laundry, other items such as shopping for grocery items, household items, and then it can also include items such as maintenance and repair work and yard work.
So these are all the things you would have to go out and hire someone to do that Beata did or was
Yes.
capable of doing. Okay. Can you tell us your calculations in that regard based on your background training experience into a reasonable economic certainty?
Sure. So for the past loss of support, for Beata, what I've done is I've calculated that from January 8th, 2017 through the beginning of this trial docket, which is September 14th, 2023. And that's a 6.7 year time period. I relied on her 2016 annual earnings, which was $61,460 per year. I then added an amount for fringe benefits at 15% of her wages. I deducted an amount for the unreimbursed business expenses at an average of 13.6% of her wages. Her personal consumption allowance, that's calculated based on total family income using national survey data based on the total family income and family configuration. That's at 11.1%. And then I've deducted a level of taxes at 13%. So that yields a net loss of support of $39,712 in the base year for a total past loss of support over the past 6.7 years of $266,070.
And then
Regarding
the future, please continue.
Okay, I was then going to go to the past replacement value of household services.
Right.
That I've done an average of 4 to 5 hours per day. So that in part is based on the household services questionnaire that I reviewed that was completed by Jack Kowalski, and he outlined the items and average number of hours per day that Maya spent doing the items of household services.
Right.
I also did research on the American Time Use Survey and reviewed the deposition transcripts that I named earlier. So I allocated 4 to 5 hours per day, and that's valued at $20.10 per hour over the past time period. That yields a total of $221,195 for the past replacement value of household services, which yields a total economic damages to date, including those two categories, of $487,265.
And is that to a reasonable economic certainty?
Yes.
And what other calculations have you performed?
I've also calculated the future loss of support and the future replacement value of household services.
All right, you've defined that. Now, how did you go about the time period for the future?
Sure. So as I stated earlier, I calculated Beata Kowalski's work life to age 58. That was based on an interview I spoke with Mr. Kowalski, and he indicated that likely around his age 70 is when Beata would have retired and they would have, potentially, hopefully enjoyed their retirement together. But he felt that that wasn't a reasonable time period because I wanted to inquire, due to their age difference, how long Beata planned on working. So that would be her age 58.1 at the time Mr. Kowalski turns age 70. So that's a 7.5 year time period into the future. And then the future replacement value of household services, I've calculated to Mr. Kowalski's life expectancy, which is 19.4 years into the future, because his life expectancy is shorter than Beata's.
Right. And what was your opinion?
Sure.
Opinions.
Yes. So the future loss of support, I grew Mrs. Kowalski's wages in commensurate with the growth in wages for nurses in the Florida, Northport, Bradenton, Sarasota area.
Mm-hmm.
So I raised her wages to $75,550. And then I also grew Mr. Kowalski's retirement benefit, that he testified that increased at an average of 3% per year. So I grew that as well over the past time period for their total family income. And then I followed the same formula that I did previously. I added a value for fringe benefits, deducted the unreimbursed business expenses, deducted taxes and personal consumption based on total family income. And then I made adjustments as for when Maya turned age 25. So the total present value of the future loss of support on the low end is $361,773 to the high end of $387,606. And then the future replacement value of household services, I've calculated this based on a loss of an average of 3 hours per day into the future for the next 19.4 years. And I value that at $24.87 per hour, which is the current average hourly wage in the services industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I've calculated that the total present value on the low end is $478,064 to the high end of $579,857, which brings the total present value for future economic damages, including the future loss of support and household services, at $839,837 to $967,463.
All right. I think we're homing in on it now. Have you performed any calculations as to future medicals and life care plan?
Yes.
Explain to the jury what those are and what you did.
Sure. So in this situation, to the future medical expenses, again, I've relied on, well, in this case, it's Dr. Baifuko. He outlines the cost, the frequency, and the duration of each future medical item that's recommended in Maya's future. Mm-hmm. So I then can calculate based on that information. I work as the calculator, and I can calculate the present value amounts of those medical expenses. And he's outlined 3 different scenarios that I've calculated.
And again, you used her life expectancy for part of these, or is that?
Yes, many of the items are calculated over her life expectancy. There are some items that are calculated over a shorter time period, and for those items, I've calculated them over the appropriate shorter time period that Dr. Bifulco has outlined.
Just out of curiosity, what is Maya's life expectancy?
Maya's life expectancy is 63.6 years. And I'm sorry, it's always awkward to talk about somebody's life expectancy with them in the courtroom.
Especially when you get to be my age and it's nowhere near that number.
Sorry. Luckily, I haven't had to calculate my own yet.
All right. Can we then have your numbers then for the futures?
Sure. For the best case scenario for the future medical expenses, the low end is $1,824,652 to the high end of $3,434,706. And then for worst case scenario, there are two alternatives. One includes private hire for attendant care and one includes agency hire for attendant care. So I've totaled those up separately.
Okay.
The worst case scenario for private hire, the low end is $5,276,372 to the high end of $8,780,443. And then the low end for the worst case scenario agency hire is $6,604,703 to the high end of $10,247,747.
And Mr. Trump and Bifulco are going to explain those out?
Yes, very much so, is my understanding.
Okay. And just so the jury knows, what is the difference between agency and the other one, the private or agency?
Private hire is where the family would, or Maya would hire a person privately and then have to pay employer taxes, such as contributions to FICA and that extent. Dr. Bifulco has outlined in those report what costs he's included for that. And then agency hire is when you hire an agency to provide a person. So they do the background checks, they find a replacement person if somebody can't show up. They handle those administrative duties. So the costs are higher to hire an agency than if you were to private hire.
Okay. Now, just to be sure, have I missed any calculations?
I don't believe so. I think we've got them all now.
All right. Sorry about that. You don't want to know. All right. Your opinions expressed here today to a reasonable degree of economic certainty based upon your background, training, experience, and examination of the record.
Yes.
You're a witness again.
Thank you. For the record, I try to get everyone an early lunch. Okay, so let me go back through some things here.
Okay.
A lot of numbers are getting thrown around, so let me see if I can kind of separate this out for the jury. We're going to talk about two different categories. One, the first one you were talking about was what would have gone to Jack Kowalski but for his wife's death in terms of what she earned and provided to him. Is that fair?
It almost. So since he was the other parent in the family, would assume that he and Beata were managing the finances, but the loss of support is allocated to the entire family.
Okay.
Until Maya would reach age 25, and there's a short time period in the calculations for that, but otherwise it's for the entire family.
And those calculations are yours, right?
Yes.
Meaning, because earlier we were talking about you're relying on Tremp, and then we're going to get to the second report where you're relying on Bifulco, and you're going to look at me and say, hey, Shapiro, I'm just doing the math on those. I'm not endorsing anything. For these ones, for the support and services, this is based on your numbers, research, and recommendations. Is that right?
Yes, the loss of support and replacement value of household services, those are my research, analysis, and calculations.
Okay, so let me try to define a couple of those terms. So you past loss of support, this is what you're calculating that Beata would have provided to the family had she not passed away in 2017, correct?
Yes, it's the financial support. The replacement value of household services is the services she performed around the house and for her family. So support is just financial support.
Okay, so let's talk about support and then we'll talk about services. Support is the money. In 2016, the last full year of earnings, Mrs. Kowalski earned $61,460, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what you need to do to figure out what the support would have gone to the family, you got to back out taxes, right?
Yes.
And you got to yeah, and I know you did. We'll talk about that. You got to back out what she would have spent on herself, right?
Yes, that's personal consumption.
Okay. So on $61,000, you only backed out 13% in taxes.
That's correct.
Is it your assumption that, well, do you know if they were married filing jointly?
I can tell you, I believe they were.
Well, adding in Mr. Kowalski's pension along with Miss Kowalski's wages, is the testimony you have to this jury that she was only going to be paying 13% in taxes?
Yes, that's what they paid 12.29% in taxes in 2016. So I rounded up to 13%.
And you gave her only a personal consumption of $14,000. Is that right?
$14,618 based on a total family income of $131,692 in 2016.
So the replacement cost of the services, you said that's like laundry and cooking and things like that?
Those are some of the items that is included in that category, yes.
Okay, so let me talk to you about the future ones you have in here. So if you look at your report for future replacement of household services, is what you're telling this jury that, for example, Mr. Kowalski should be paid $25 an hour, $75 a day to do laundry, cooking, and cleaning now?
No, that's not. So first of all, it's the replacement value of those services that she was providing around the house. And I can let you know what he indicated she was doing. So dusting, ironing, meal preparation, bed making, cleaning bathrooms, laundry, dishwashing, bill paying, bookkeeping, shopping for clothing and household supplies, budgeting and tax preparation, grocery shopping, and helping to assist to take care of sick child.
Okay. But what you're telling this jury is that Mr. Kowalski, through a survey to you, has asked for $25 an hour from today going forward to do those chores now. Is that right?
He hasn't asked me for that money. I've just calculated the value for them. And I did that in conjunction with the American Time Use Survey. So this 3 hours per day is very reasonable and in alignment with what women report doing in the house with no children under age 18 and at various levels or at various ages, and if they're married. So I'm looking at the value of those services, the things that she was doing around the house to assist. And it's my understanding that her children have a claim into these services as well until they're age 25. So I have calculated it to Mr. Kowalski's life expectancy of 19.4 years, but there's a portion of the time in the future that both Maya and Kyle would also be entitled to some of the value of those services.
Do you know if the Kowalskis have had to hire anybody to perform those services?
I don't know specifically, but that wouldn't impact my calculations. I'm just looking at the economic value of those services Whether they go undone or they're done by a family member doesn't impact the calculations. I'm looking at their value.
So talking about the future medical losses, now we're back in a scenario where you're not saying this is necessary, you're just doing the numbers. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to make Maya feel better. When you said 63.6, that's additional years from today, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just so no one got scared here. Okay. I didn't want anyone to get worried.
No.
From what you have here, you're projecting Maya to live a full life compared to averages, right?
It's population data, so it includes all comorbidities into that data, but it's the 2020 data for white females age, I believe 17 to 18.
Yeah, I'll short circuit it just in the interest of time.
Okay.
You're predicting, well, you're not predicting anything on this. You're pulling the Social Security data, and for white females who are now age almost 18, they expect to live till about 81. Is that right?
Yes, and then at age 81, she would have an additional life expectancy code, so we could make her feel a little bit better as well. If you'd like me to give that, an 81 to 82-year-old white female has an additional 8.6 years life expectancy, for which I have not included any calculations.
I get it. I just didn't want her to feel bad because she's over my right shoulder thinking anything was going to be that someone was predicted to die at 63. Okay, now that we got that out of the way. Your future economic losses include up to $3 million for Maya to have somebody with her 24/7 starting now, right?
Let's see. Sorry, give me just a moment. I'm almost there. So Dr. Baifuko's life care plan, it does say beginning age 18, ending age 28, but in the commentary section, it says begin and end dates are provided for calculations purposes. They are used to estimate a 10-year time span. So I will defer to whatever his testimony is later today, but I read that as it's a 10-year time period to occur anytime between now and the end of her life expectancy.
Okay, but just so this jury's clear, your calculation began an assumption that Maya was going to need somebody with her to take care of her 24/7 beginning at age 18 for 10 years, and that totals $3,070,000. Is that right?
So it's
Objection, ask and answer. That was
Overruled, she can answer.
the last one.
It's calculated for a 10-year time period. It says begin 18 and 28, but I'm not saying it has to start at her age 18. But yes, it's 24-hour care for 10 years.
So your interpretation of Dr. Bifulco's report is he said that it's medically necessary for Maya to have somebody taking care of her 24/7 from an agency hire, correct?
He gave two options, one for private hire and one for agency hire, and it indicates that it was recommended by Dr. Kirkpatrick.
Let's talk about that also. So it was Kirkpatrick recommending that Maya was going to need somebody with her 24/7 to take care of her starting at age 18 for 10 years. True?
Again, I don't know if it necessarily needs to start at age 18, and I'm going to stay out of the medical testimony recommendations. I've just done the calculations. I will refer to Dr. Baifuko and the other medical testimony. I was just reading Dr. Baifuko's report, but I'm just calculating here. I have no medical opinion whatsoever.
Well, your calculations have $5,297,715 in ketamine. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's the high end range of the worst case scenario.
And those numbers also came ultimately from Dr. Kirkpatrick, right?
Let me see. Yes, it indicates in Dr. Bifoucault's report that Dr. Kirkpatrick recommended those, but I will defer to the medical testimony in Dr. Bifoucault's.
Right. And I promise you, I'm trying to be fair to you. Again,
Okay.
you're just running the numbers. You're not saying that this is medically necessary, but the numbers provided to you calculated of all of these damages up to almost $5.3 million in ketamine, which would envision Maya starting ketamine immediately and going until she's 80. True?
It's calculated over her life expectancy of 63.6 years. It's an average of, he indicated 5 sessions per year at $12,000 per session, so that's $60,000 a year.
Okay. We'll ask Dr. Bifulco about the rest. I do appreciate your time. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
So depending on, as to that 10 years, the jury, with that calculation, and from what you understand of Dr. Bifulco's report, they can start that 10-year period at any time and determine the amount from there.
Objection, mischaracterization.
Overruled.
It's my understanding that it's just a 10-year period to occur within her life expectancy, that he put that time frame in there for calculations purposes, but essentially this 10 years can be allocated at any point over her life expectancy, and the jury could just take the amount per year multiplied by the time period for whatever they deem is appropriate based on the testimony they hear.
So depending on the testimony they have heard and hear of when the onset of these problems are most likely to occur, they can then take those numbers and apply them?
Same objection here.
Overruled. She can answer.
Yes, so the calculations I've done provide the low and high range for the 10-year time period. If it's to not start at age 18, it's just assuming the offset method until it starts. For the calculations, I haven't grown the wages at all from now until when it starts, because it's my understanding we don't know exactly when it's going to start. But regardless of that, based on the medical testimony, they would just take the amount per year. So in this situation for the private hire, it's $153,212 and multiply that over whatever time period they deem is appropriate. And that would take into consideration this attendant care to occur at any point over her remaining life expectancy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Don't leave, Ms. Kirby.
I won't.
I'm going to ask the jury if they have any questions, and the answer is yes.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Kirby, I'm going to mute your feed here. Okay, so you won't be
Okay.
able to hear us. Ms. Kirby, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you. And members of the jury, there was a note I received during the questioning. Will we get a copy of that? And it was at the time of the discussion of the medical bills. The answer is yes, those are in evidence, and you'll have those with you back in the jury deliberation room. Next, or the first question for you, Ms. Kirby. You have covered multiple calculations and the theories used to arrive at final figures. All this is well and fine using Maya in this example and treating Maya like a, quote, stock, end quote, traded on the stock exchange. Her past educational performance shows the ability for more than favorable to high returns. Did your calculations take into account that Maya could, like some witness in this very courtroom, Maya had the capabilities to make exuberant amounts of income over the course of her lifetime? Or were middle-of-the-road statistical income levels used in your calculations?
Sure, good question. So I've relied on the vocational assessment of Mr. Trump for her pre-injury earning capacity. And based on my review of his report, he will defer, or he will explain that later, how he has allocated the 97,000. Let me find it. Sorry, I've got too many reports here. Okay, the $97,916. I did do research on the same data that he provided, because the data he provided was from 2019. And the current data, same data, is now would equal $108,316 or $316 per year, so 108,316. I haven't included that higher value. I've just relied on the figures that are provided in Trump's report, as he indicated when he gave an updated assessment in August of this year that he didn't change any of the opinions in his report. And part of that question also referred to the stock market. And so I'm not sure if they're inquiring about the interest earnings on safe government investments, but that data is standard data that economists use. It's the most risk-free investment, as this money is not supposed to be placed at risk. When you invest in other avenues, you may yield a higher return, but you also have a greater risk of losing that money, and it's not guaranteed. So the economists in my field routinely will rely upon the interest earnings on safe government investments. I haven't made any adjustments to the vocational assessment that Mr. Trump has provided and the figures that he outlined.
Next question, Ms. Kirby. I may have missed it while scribbling my other question. Was the possibility that Maya's PTSD affects her ability for possible relationship, then marriage, family, children, and all the, quote, things, end quote, that her past family enjoyed, but now will never be able to continue? She now may not be able to enjoy, quote, motherhood, end quote, like her mother did. And if Maya does have children, was there any, quote, monetary value, end quote, placed on the added stress Maya would have when her children went to a hospital for something? Or should I add, if able to, additional, quote, monetary value, end quote, to your figures?
You have a good jury with good questions, but I have not added any. Those are what I believe are considered pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life, or human damages, as Mr. Anderson referred to them. I have not calculated any value for those. I've strictly calculated the economic damages in this case, so the hard dollar amounts.
Okay. During the asking of these, I received another juror question. It's one quick question, so I'm just going to see if you have any objection, and if not, I'm going to. Okay, there was no objection.
Okay.
Ms. Kirby, what is the average statistical income of a 28-year-old at this time?
Well, I didn't bring that data with me, but I think that would be, there is data out there regarding that. I think that would best be a question for Trump to answer, as he's outlined all of the research data and how he's looked at the earnings for that. I was trying to look in his report real quick to see if there was something we could add to that. So the data, and he'll speak to this, but just for a little bit of clarification, it says the data are for persons age 25 or over, and it has the median earnings at $1,883. That's the median average earnings. So in the middle in 2019. Again, I spoke about the current data is a little bit higher than that, but Mr. Trump will be able to speak more thoroughly regarding that information, I believe.
Mr. Anderson, or do you have any further follow-up questions?
That $1,883 is per week, not
Yes, per
annually,
week.
I trust.
No, not annually, and I'm sorry if I misspoke. It's $1,883 per week, or $97,916 per year.
Members of the jury, any further questions? Seeing none, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Shapiro, may Ms. Kirby be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
She may, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kirby. You're free to go.
Thank you, Your Honor. Kick me out.
I'm going to kick you out of the Zoom.
All right, thank you. Have a
There you go. Must be lunchtime. Okay, members of the jury, given the time, we're going to go ahead and take our lunch break. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not do any investigation and receive no information. Deputy Coley, if I could have them back at 1:45, ready to go at 1:45.
All right.
Okay, thank you. The jury is out of our presence. Are there any issues we need to address before we go? Everyone feel free to sit down. Any issues we need to address before we leave?
Your Honor, I did not attempt to put the economic report into evidence based on the court's prior ruling. Does the court, I know you don't like give advisory.
I'm going to object if that helps.
I figured. All right. We'll go with the board.
See, it's like I didn't even need to be here.
Nothing further from the defense, Your Honor.
So if we are back at 1:30, so about an hour and 12 minutes from now, is that enough time for y'all to prepare for the afternoon and have lunch and all that?
When did the court want to take up the rest of the exhibits?
Well, I'll have 15 minutes starting at 1:30.
1:30?
1:30. Okay, everyone have a good lunch. See you back at 1:30.